If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
What are the scariest and most eerie true encounters you've had with the paranormal or supernatural?
When I was 8 years old, a dark figure used to watch me sleep. I saw a ghost when I was younger, and I want some answers as to what happened. I will give as much detail as possible. 15 years ago, when I was 8 years old, I had this dark figure stand in my open doorway. But it wouldn't stand directly in the doorway but more on the side and leaning into the doorway, as if to sort of hide. I think it was hiding because when I went to look at it directly, it would remove its hands from grabbing my door frame, and it would hide back in the wall. But when I looked away, it would grab my door frame again and lean back into my doorway, just standing and watching. For 2 or 3 months I would sleep under my covers. I wouldn't dare shut my door at night because I didn't want to risk being stuck in my bedroom with a dark figure. One night I got fed up, and I got out of bed and charged the dark figure. Now I saw his whole frame, head to toe, as he was running backwards away from me. But when I caught up to him at the end of the hall, I punched him straight through his chest, and he vanished. He didn't disappear for good, though. I started seeing him during the day and only during the day now. One day I was sitting in my bedroom with my mom when the dark figure appeared standing beside my dresser. My mom didn't see it, but I did. To prove its existence to my mom, I asked it, "Mr. Ghost, can you make the rain stop?" And the rain stopped immediately. Not in a few seconds, but the moment I asked the ghost that question. And then I never saw it again ever. I just want some answers as to what this whole thing was. The last owner of the house also ended themselves, but I am not sure if they did it in the house or not. When I was 5 or so, my parents purchased a piece of land from our neighbor whose house and yard were behind ours, basically, making our backyard much larger. Part of that land included an old stone gazebo that dated back to around 1850, this was around 2000, so it was about 150 years old at the time. Our neighbor didn't have a ton of information on the gazebo. It predated her house and ours, which were built in the 1950s and 1930s, respectively. In fact, it predated the entire neighborhood. The oldest houses were generally from the 1910s-20s, and previously the area had been used as a military testing site for mustard gas and other things during World War I. It certainly seems odd that this big, 400 square feet, gazebo was built basically in the middle of nowhere, at that time, and also withstood the development of the surrounding area. Anyway, as soon as my parents bought the land, I started having horrible nightmares every night. In the nightmares, I would be standing in the yard at night and looking into the dark gazebo. I could make out all of these pained faces in the darkness, as if people were sitting on the floor of the gazebo screaming and crying. Sometimes the fireplace in there would be lit, and I'd see someone jump into it. It freaked my mom out in particular because she was convinced I could sense things. My mom is a legit white-collar professional with no spiritual background, but she still thinks this about me to this day despite my disagreement lol. The nightmares were vivid, though, and it's actually making me feel a little sick as I remember them. All of that said, you asked specifically about Halloween, which is where this gets weird. My parents started putting a pool in the yard and also decided to change the flooring and add structural reinforcements to the gazebo. I kid you not, on Halloween itself, the people working on the yard were excavating behind the gazebo and under the flagstone flooring. They found human bones and a few large stones with names carved into them. We could not find any records the names on the stones. The people who dug up the bones were understandably freaked out. The police came and were basically like, "Ha, weird." Nothing else ever came of it, but the nightmares did eventually stop. When I was about 7-ish, my bestie and our families were camping together at Roshan Sands, Buffalo Lake, and we wanted to sleep over on the beach together, and obviously our parents said no. So we snuck out of our campers with snacks, pillows, and blankets and went to the beach. We set everything up and lay down talking and watching the water. Then, we both gasped and asked if we saw that a little further down the sand. We both saw a little boy in swim trunks rise up from the ground out of nowhere and just walk straight into the water until he was head down and completely gone. We both got an extremely eerie feeling, freaked out, and immediately grabbed our things and ran back to our campers. It was the creepiest experience I've ever had. I have to wonder now, as an adult, if it meant at one point that little boy drowned right there in the water, and that was his ghost. I grew up on Clarkson Hill, located about an hour east of Grande Prairie. Along a commonly used road, there was an abandoned house on a tight corner. My grandpa told me many times about crazy old Charney. As you'd drive by, he'd take potshots at you with his .22. Or he'd chase you with a rock, etc., and you'd call him a mean old bastard. I always kind of laughed and thought it was just a local legend. When I was a teen, my mom's cousin visited from the States, so we showed her family around. We went to the river, out to the old general store, and one of those stops was Charney's abandoned house. We entered the house, looked around, and it appeared just like any other abandoned house, nothing unusual about it. Anyway, we all stood in front of the house with the broken out windows and dilapidated facade and took a group picture. At that time, when physical photo film was used, a few days later my mom received a call from her cousin. She says, "You have to come out here and see this picture." My mom just urges her to tell her what she sees because it's quite a drive, but her cousin insists. So the next day we get out there, we sit at the kitchen table, she slides the picture in front of us, and says, "Do you see anything weird?" And I remember 100% seeing a human face in the window over my left shoulder. But my mom is sitting there with her mouth open and says, "Holy shit, that's Charney." She recognized the face as the man she had seen many times shoot at their passing vehicle. At this point he'd been dead for 10 years. Creature. So for starters, I was just trying to fall asleep in my room but couldn't because I had felt watched, so I did what I always do and turned on my phone flashlight, and there by my closet was a creature, long fingers, elongated arms and legs, skin a kind of porcelain, reflective eyes, and it was so bony, like its skin had almost no muscle, just laying over bones. This creature was crouched, just staring at me, not moving, not blinking, and it didn't seem to breathe, it just stared, so I thought I had been imagining it, so I turned my flashlight off and then turned it back on. And guess who was still there staring? So I turned over and fell asleep. The next night the thing was in the same place just outside my closet but also by a doll cabinet in my room doing the same thing as last time, so I just went to sleep again. After that I had enough of this entity watching me sleep, so I went to my sister's room, and I was explaining to her in more detail what happened, but out of nowhere the room goes from feeling really safe to just feeling a seething rage from outside the door to my sister's room, and we both went quiet. I had wondered if she could also feel the heavy presence, but eventually we both decided to go to bed. Then, in the afternoon, my sister made me this little pouch to ward it off, but I had insisted I didn't need it. Then, that night, I could feel its presence, so I snatched that little pouch, and it's been gone ever since. When my family would visit my grandparents when I was 5 to 8 years old, I was convinced I'd see an outline of a person standing in the basement doorway at night. I was utterly certain that a figure stood there, but the darkness prevented me from distinguishing any features, and the figure's height assuredly disqualified any of my family members. Everyone else would be asleep on their guest beds, and I'd be lying there in the darkness, unable to move because I was so afraid. I remember my nightgown being soaked with sweat despite it being freezing in the basement, like I was that terrified. Anywho, my grandparents ended up moving out of that house, but even then, once in a while back home, I swear I'd see a shadowy figure peering around the doorway to my bedroom. Again, definitely not a member of my family, as the figure was much too tall. A few years later I mentioned it to my grandfather, who jokingly said it was probably a dead soldier looking for his whiskey. It all started when I was 6. I live in an ancient house, about 100 years old. I have lived in the same house since I was 6 years old. When we first moved, I was excited and just happy to explore a new house. About 2 weeks after moving, I was playing in my room while my mom worked on unpacking. I was on the floor brushing out my doll's hair when I heard a loud thud. We had a ferret and 2 dogs, so honestly, I thought nothing of it. It wasn't until I heard my name being called by a deep voice that definitely wasn't my mom or dad that I panicked. I screamed bloody murder, and my mom came rushing into my room asking what was wrong. I, of course, said there was a man in the room that was talking to me. Mom freaked out and started calling my dad and looking around, thinking someone had broken into the house. The house came back fine, no one was there, and my parents skimmed it down to my imagination. Fast forward to the next week. I had just woken up around 3 a.m. and was dying for water. I got up and went to the kitchen to quench my thirst, and as I came back into my room, there was a man standing in front of my fireplace smiling at me. I dropped the water and almost stripped my throat. I screamed so loud, of course, my parents thought I had died and came rushing to my rescue. My dad searched the house again, and nothing turned up. My siblings would hear footsteps and voices and be scared to even leave the room at night. It's been 12 years now, I still wake up around 3 every night, and I still see the ghost I call George watching and smiling. Makes me scared to be outside at night. So a few months ago, a cop in my town pulled me over and saw my address and had an intriguing look on his face when he asked if he could tell me a story. He told me that a few months prior, he visited my street at around 3 in the morning. My neighbor's husband was out of town for work, and she kept hearing knocking on her window. She called the police because she has multiple sclerosis, a hard time getting around and protecting herself, and it really freaked her out. He went to check everything out. When he was there, after looking around the outside of her house, he was sitting in his vehicle writing a report. And he heard knocking on his window. When he went to her door and asked her what the knocking sounded like, she did the same thing. Last night, I was sitting in my car around 3:30 in the morning. The lights in my car randomly went dark, and I heard a knock on my passenger side window. My heart started racing. So freaking scary. I wonder who is haunting my street. My town is known for being extremely haunted. Rear view mirror from August 1996. I live in Kentucky, and I have had many creepy things happen to me. I will share one incident that happened to my mother in 1996. A cousin of my mother's got killed, and she went to the wake, but I didn't go to the funeral home. Around twilight she picked me up, and we stopped at Baskin-Robbins and had some ice cream. Then we went home. The road to our place was curvy and had a lot of trees around the road. At one point past the big curve, my mother looked into her rearview mirror and yelped, "Oh!" She hit the gas and sped up, and I started looking over my shoulder and couldn't see anything anywhere. There were no cars behind us or anything. I thought she had seen someone on the side of the road. But a few minutes later she repeated her actions, and I started freaking out, wanting to know what she saw. She continued to glance in her rearview mirror while simultaneously applying the gas pedal. When we got home, she hurried me onto the porch, and I stopped and told her that I wanted to know what she had seen. She tells me that she looked in her rearview mirror, and sitting in the seat behind me was a grayish figure with long grayish black hair, and it had black holes for eyes. It was turned towards my mother, and she kept seeing it and was trying to get home to get out of the car. That sent me into shock, and I ran to get into the house. Even though you can't really escape that kind of thing, we felt safer in the house. I had cold chills, and my hair stood up. My family, friends, and I have had many paranormal experiences, and I keep journals of these things. My mother saw this creature a few times after this sighting, but nothing else happened. Okay, so I got a good one. Requires a bit of backstory. I have a friend who is a 7th generation Hoodoo seer and medium, and we did an exchange of goods and services back in January. I got a life path reading in exchange for making her social media marketing materials for her small business. Rapidly she told me my sister, whom I care for, has something dark attached to her. My sister is schizophrenic, and she had claimed that something is messing with her mind, and before this reading, she was the worst mentally that I had seen in a very long time. I asked the seer to describe the entity, and she told me the exact same thing my sister had: big, dark, and sticky, and it has friends with it. So the seer walked me through a protection ritual, which I did, and when I got to my sister's room, I stopped at her full-length mirror and got my face real close to it to fuss with a zit, and it smelled like straight-up sulfur. Bad. And that smell gave me this deep, primal gut feeling of danger. I took that shit outside and smashed it to hell. I didn't know what else to do. I hope that was the right thing. For curious minds, here's more of the story that doesn't have to do with a mirror. I'm a hardcore skeptic, and even though this was a friend of mine, I still ran my little legitimacy tests throughout the reading, and I was constantly looking for signs of schizophrenia, and I'm 100% convinced she is the real deal. I waited until my sister was away to do the protection ritual. I kept her in the dark about everything because I didn't want a self-fulfilling prophecy situation. When she got home, she was the best mentally that I had seen her in over a decade. The seer said the entities were feeding off of her and bombarding her, and once I do the protection ritual, she wouldn't be surprised if my sister let out an audible gasp. The seer also told me that my sister was going to see one of the protection symbols I put up and either rip it down or insult it and then immediately say, "I don't know why I did that, and I should know that it was the dark entity speaking through her." So I drew the symbols on the actual wall so she couldn't rip them down. When she saw them, she said in a snarky tone, "I saw the swastikas you put up." Snaps out of it, "I don't know why I said that." The seer also said the entity was going to be mad I took away its toy, and it was going to show me, and boy did it. For the next 3 to 4 days I kept seeing movement out of the windows. I felt on edge and watched. Something would slam on the side of the house, and things were falling and breaking when I was the most skittish, etc. My 2 kitties stayed one on each side of me all the time like they were on guard, or all 4 kitties in the house would sit in a semicircle facing a door or a window. It was the most afraid I've been in a very long time. Another thing of note is the seer said that there's an event in our future that's going to change a lot of things for us, and if we don't take the opportunity, we won't enter 2025, the suffering will be too much. What is particularly interesting about this is that I didn't mention to her that I had been thinking about the old double dignified unalive. If you get my drift, not once. And I hadn't been thinking about it in a daydreaming kind of way, I had been thinking about the logistics of putting the wheels in motion and where I was going to draw the line to execute the plan. Then she said, "So don't get the helium just yet, and my eyes instantly got wide, and I froze. Ending by helium is the plan, and I never mentioned that at all. The entire experience changed my worldview. So that's my story. There was a poltergeist in my school. This was in the early 90s. My school had a couple of solo buildings at the play area that had been shut down. Before being shut down, they were cleaned up and left closed. Everyone was aware that the building was unused and securely closed. It was 2 classrooms, there was no way somebody could have snuck there with everyone watching, and there was nothing interesting to burglarize there, literally just chairs. Some students started reporting noises coming from this building and feeling like someone was trapped there. So they went to check, nothing unusual. Then I and other people passed by the buildings and heard chairs moving around, but all windows were shut and there was no light, so we knew it wasn't class. We again reported hearing stuff there. The school administration believed the noises were due to vandalism, so they installed padlocks on the doors. We were told to stay in a certain area of the school grounds, and the janitor was there to enforce it. Some students reported hearing chairs banging, so when they went to check in there, some chairs had been thrown to the walls and out of place. Usually they would be stacked in order. There was only one janitor who had been there forever, and no other person could have had access with the new padlocks in there. One day I wasn't feeling like going to class, so I hid in that area where no one would come looking for me, and I heard banging on the walls and chairs moving, and I was like, yes, we're going to catch it. So I ran to the janitor and told him what I heard. He bolted there with me and told me to stay behind, but from where I was, I could see him opening the door, and there were handprints on the blackboard made of chalk, adult handprints, high up on the board, and absolutely no one in the classroom. He said, "This is not funny, really not funny," and went to talk to the school's director and brought me to some other area where they asked me what I saw. I didn't really see anything, I just heard as if someone was there. After that time, but from that day on, I wouldn't go anywhere near the building. And they just sort of gave up, locked it for good, took the objects out, and put a fence there so you couldn't just wander near it. At the time I thought it was somebody who had done it and that we weren't fast enough to catch it. But looking back at the reaction from the school staff and how much work it took to unlock the only door you could access the building through, I realized it could not have been a person, and the handprints were very unnatural looking, without the wrinkles a normal hand would have. They kind of made me believe it must have been a person, and I didn't go there anymore. I was house sitting for my sister-in-law with my now wife a few years ago. It's in Kensington, Victoria, Australia. It's a very old suburb, and they live in an old public housing townhouse. We could only stay there one night because it freaked us out so much. The first thing I noticed was that my partner was watching TV alone at home, waiting for me to return from work. There was constant scratching and knocking at the window. The funny thing is that there is a balcony on the other side of it, and there are no trees or anything touching it. The second experience for me when I got there was after my shower, looking down the stairs waiting for my partner to finish, and a small white orb flew at my face. It was not a bug or an illusion, this was a friggin' orb. Third, my partner kept hearing the TV turning on and off by itself while we were in bed. Fourth, in the morning both I and my partner woke up to this extremely loud buzzing noise in our ears. My partner and I were a bit freaked out by it, so she started getting ready for work, and I wanted to sleep and dismiss it as nothing. I slept for maybe 2 to 5 minutes longer, and then it happened again. It was like a loud scream in your ear, but at the same time like having a bee stuck in there. After that, and my partner having to deal with the knocking and scratching again before I got home, we decided to go home. As it sort of felt like we weren't welcome to stay there. Other friends of ours staying over there have experienced seeing a little girl jump on the bed in one of the rooms. And some other random events. We still wonder how my wife's sister and partner's family can still live there. Another experience of mine I had when I was younger was walking in the Australian wilderness. I can't remember the exact location, because I was around 12, but I was walking toward a rock pool with a small waterfall. There was a rock in the center of it. As I just came upon the pool, there was an Aboriginal man sitting on the rock in the center. I could only see him with my peripheral vision. He seemed very muscular with a spear in one hand, just sitting there watching me walk past. I drew the center of my eye to his location sitting on the rock, and he just disappeared into nothing. No mist, it was like I just couldn't see him anymore with my direct vision. I tried again with peripheral but nothing. The only reason I can validate I saw something is because my mother saw the same thing. I asked her, "Did you see that?" She said, "Yes," and before saying what it was, I asked her what she thought it was, an Aboriginal man sitting on the rock. Years later I asked again and received the same answer. So I know it was something. Those are my experiences with ghosts. The other experiences were 2 UFOs, but much less of a story there. While walking the dogs, I saw objects that looked nothing like traditional aircraft, balloons, or kites. There could be rational, man-made explanations for those, but I don't know any further than that. Around 12 years ago, I was sleeping in my bed, which was in front of my mirrored closet doors. I woke up suddenly with a jolt of energy coursing through my body. I stretched my arms and felt something staring at me to my left between my dresser and a little night table and saw nothing there. Then my gaze drifted to the mirrors, and there was a small figure standing there. Its head wasn't turned toward the closer mirror at the time. My eyes went back to the spot between the table and dresser and then went back to the mirror, repeating that same movement one more time to be certain I wasn't just seeing things. Then my sight locked toward the mirror that somehow reflected the image of this child standing right beside my bed, and I just said, "Well, hello there." Just as I said my greeting, its head turned toward the mirror and looked right at me. I said, interesting. Soon after blinking a few times, it disappeared. Needless to say, it added more to my curiosity toward the non-physical aspects of existence. My fiancée and I lived on the top floor of a 4-story apartment. At the time, I was going to night school to finish my shit. It was like 11:30 at night, and she called me to tell me that someone was shaking the front doorknob violently to try and get in. I checked the camera at my door, which is every square inch covered. The camera shows nothing. So I put it on the live view, and after a couple of seconds, the handle starts violently shaking. Well, we heard it. I couldn't see it on the camera, and she was in the furthest corner of the apartment with a shotgun pointed towards the only egress point. I got on my motorcycle and blew through every red light for the 4-something miles our house was away. Made it in minutes. When the elevator to our floor opened, I got this horrible, ominous feeling, like something was in my throat. I round the corner, nothing. Enter the house, nothing. Decide everything's normal and try to come up with logical explanations. Weird shots start happening. My fiancée was following our tiny 19-year-old dog as she went under the bed. She got down on her knees, and she wasn't there. She was on the couch like 20 feet away in the living room. Our closet was in the bathroom, 1B, and our cat would sit in the tub facing the door, loudly meowing, angry like. Also, that door would never stay shut. You could shut it, walk out, and an hour or so later it would be open. And yes, I checked if maybe it was a draft or something. Nope. We saged and put salt out. It chilled for a bit, then we came home, and our recliner was turned completely with the separate ottoman facing the fish tank. We would find plates and shit in our drawers. It got so bad we moved into the living room to get a better view of the house and give her an office. One night I hear someone walking around our island, and I thought it was her. The next morning I'm like, "Hey, Godzilla, good job stomping last night." She looked at me, shook. She thought it was me and didn't even get out of bed. You would hit pockets of what smelled like rot or something and walk 5 feet away, and it would be gone. Then you would go right back and wouldn't be able to find it again. End result, I don't know, but tons of other little things happened. Shit's tucked, we moved. I lived on the island of Saipan until I was 18. I've told this story to close friends, and it's been my best ghost story. I would like to know what you all think about it and possible explanations. When I was about 15, my cousin moved in and lived with me. It was awesome, and I had a small group of friends who would regularly meet up at my house to hang out. I lived high up on a hill called Navy Hill. We had access to a private basketball court, so every weekend we would walk from my house down to the court, 30 minutes walk. The road is a 2-lane highway, with boonies on both sides, with no houses on either side for most of this trek. I will include a picture of the exact area so you have an idea. We always made an effort to stop playing basketball before it got dark because none of us were old enough to drive yet. One evening we messed up, and it had gotten dark. My cousin and I were pretty fearless, so we didn't think much of it and decided to start walking back home. Halfway through the walk there is a curve in the road. There are streetlights illuminating our path, so it's not complete darkness. So we're walking, having a good time, and cracking jokes. As we approach the curve, the streetlight, which had been on the entire time, turns off. Okay, that was weird, I thought, but shit happens. About 5 seconds later, a black figure runs down from the jungle on the left and across the street to the jungle on the right side. There was enough moonlight to illuminate its silhouette, but not enough for a face or any other features. At that moment my cousin and I both look at each other and yell, "Run!" We ran all the way back home, not stopping. I don't think I ran faster than I did that day. It didn't end there. The foot of my bed was facing my window, which led to the back of my house. The back of my house had approximately 7 feet of flat land before it dropped off into a very steep hill. That night, I woke up around 1 a.m. and saw what I can only remember as a glowing white figure standing outside of my window, staring inside. I didn't perceive it as malicious, but rather as curious. I don't remember much from that, but I asked my cousin the next day. And he had said he saw it too but didn't want to say anything. We had a bunk bed. Anyway, that's my story. Believe it or not, I'm just curious what everyone thinks. Thanks. I was asleep at my parents' house when no one else was home and fell asleep with my bedroom door open. I woke up from a dead sleep for no reason and looked over my shoulder to find a figure standing in the doorframe. The only way I can describe its appearance is as a gray, cloud-like mass that had the shape of a man's body. I couldn't make out facial features or clothing or any color, but I could tell that when he realized I could see him, I'd startled him, which startled me. As soon as we both scared each other, he ran into the next room, and I could hear his footsteps. Confused, I called out to see if anyone was there and got no response. I immediately told my parents what had happened, and they shrugged it off as some confused dream state I must have been in. A couple of days later, I returned home to find the person who was installing our wood floors, and he told me that he didn't think he could return to finish the job. He was hesitant to tell me what happened, but I assured him I knew where this was going. He admitted to being a non-believer, but after what he'd seen, he was a total believer. What he saw in the reflection of a mirror was a man walk away from him into the living room, but when he went to find out who it was, no one was there. I was thrilled to have him tell this story to my parents. Fast forward a couple more days, and my mom had woken up to go to the bathroom, and when she looked into the dining room from a distance, she saw my dad standing with his back towards her, looking at his phone, as he does first thing in the morning, but standing oddly close to him was a figure my mom thought was me at the time. When she asked me that night what I was talking to my dad about this morning and why I was standing so close to him, I assured her I was fast asleep that early in the morning and hadn't spoken to my dad that day. In between these events we would also experience pitch black masses that felt like they thrust themselves towards us, which was startling because it was like a rush of nothing coming at you and then disappearing. My mom had a fit with the door and couldn't understand why my dad was standing there pulling it shut when she was trying to open it, but he was nowhere near the door. My mom finally gave in and called a lady to bless the house. We didn't tell her anything about the events that had been happening, and after she prayed in each of the bedrooms, she asked my mom about a rocking chair in one of the rooms because while she was in the room praying, it began to rock back and forth, which told her there might be a spirit attached to it. I'd never even seen this rocking chair, and my mom admitted she'd just gotten it from an estate sale. It also explains why the figure ran into that room when I startled it. I think maybe the rocking chair was a portal this ghost had been traveling through and was confused about his surroundings. Needless to say, after the woman asked the spirit to leave the house, we never experienced anything again, and we got rid of the rocking chair. This experience made me a hands down, no doubt believer in the paranormal. When I was 5 years old, we lived in Ritzville, Washington. A very, very small town. My brother and I had a bunk bed, and I slept on the top bunk. Wetting the bed was a habit when I was younger, and so one night I had to get up and go to the bathroom. I tossed my covers to the side and sat up in bed. Straight ahead at the end of the bunk was a 6-foot being staring at me. Its head was oval in shape and spanned almost 3 feet across. It had beady yellow eyes that were centered in the middle of its face. There was enough light in the room to see that its skin was black. I stared at it for a few seconds, long enough for the image to be burnt inside my memory, and so I did what any kid would do, hide under the covers. I was unbelievably scared and breathing extremely fast, hoping it would go away. I don't know how long it was watching me, but I could feel it staring at me underneath the covers. I eventually fell back asleep and told my mom first thing in the morning. I always made it a habit to close the closet door in the room before bedtime, and the weird part is, it was open when my brother and I woke up. To this day I cannot sleep with a closet door open, and I cannot sleep without a night light. I've thought about it every single night for 27 years. Occasionally I half expect to see it again. I remember it like it was yesterday. I still vividly recall a strange memory from when I was around 3 years old. We lived in South Dakota, and I remember my parents were going to take us to dinner one evening. I was told to go get my Star shoes, Converse brand, and they were upstairs in my parents' room. Their bedroom room light was off, but the hallway light illuminated it enough to see clearly. Right as I peeked at the top of the stairs, I saw the back half of a tall, lanky, yellow figure walk straight into the closet. My mom called up asking what was taking so long, and I couldn't muster up the courage to get my shoes. And that's all I remember from that night. I had a couple of weird experiences. The first experience occurred while I was in Gettysburg taking a night tour of the battlefield. I was with a group of friends and walking down a trail when I saw what I thought was one of the many reenactors dressed as a soldier and sitting on a horse a few hundred yards away. I thought it was a bit odd that he was all by himself at night. As we kept walking, he didn't get any closer but at the same time seemed to get a bit fuzzier. At this point I ask a few of the friends I was with what they see, and they all say the same thing, a reenactor on a horse, but kind of fuzzy, like there is fog there, even though there isn't. Then he just faded away, horse and all. The second was in my room at my parents' house. One of those hinged folding screens separated my room from the stairs in the basement. One night I woke up but wasn't sure why. There was some light filtering down the stairs, so it wasn't pitch black, and I felt but didn't see or hear something coming down the stairs. Half the staircase is completely blocked by a wall. After that, the wall opened up, and it was just a railing the rest of the way down. Right at that point is also where the screen touched the stairs, and there was a couple of square feet of gap. When it got to that point, it blocked out the light, and I could see the silhouette of a woman. She turned right at the bottom of the stairs, which led her behind the screen into the opening to my room. As she passed each of the gaps between the screen panels, she again blocked out the light. This seemed to take forever to happen, and I was terrified and just sitting there frozen in bed. There were 4 panels, and after she passed the gap between the last 2, nothing else happened. She never appeared at the actual opening. She was just gone. My paranormal experience as a kid. I have experienced paranormal activity ever since I could remember. Because of this, I have never really been afraid of it. Actually, I have always been very interested in it. One of the scariest experiences I have ever had happened over a long period of time. I was around the ages of 3 to 7. Every night around midnight my grandmother would fly up to my window that was on the 3rd story. She would continuously knock on the window until I would eventually wake up and go over to her, and she would tell me to go to the woods. Keep in mind my house was surrounded by thick woods all the way around. These woods always gave off a really sickening vibe. Side story, my parents would always send me out to play in the backyard by myself. I had such a terrible feeling about the woods that I would always sneak back inside because I didn't feel safe outside alone. Once my parents locked all the doors to get into the house because I kept sneaking inside after they sent me out. I stood in between the door and its frame, crying and begging them to let me in. I was a very adventurous kid who would do anything to explore, and I wasn't afraid of being alone outside at other people's houses. Anyways, she would often put some kind of odd explanation behind it, like, "I'm going to take you shopping if you get in my car, follow me to the woods." Somehow I knew it wasn't her, she just didn't give off the same energy as she normally did. However, I would still wake my parents up and ask them if I could go into the woods with my grandmother. I know it wasn't a reoccurring dream because it would happen to not only my little sister but my mother as well. It got to a point where my parents had to board up my window, so I wouldn't eventually jump out of my window and die. My grandmother wasn't the only thing that this creature would take the form of. Around the time that my parents boarded up my window, there was a little girl with beautiful blue eyes and wavy blonde hair. She would always skip into my room with her pink Victorian dress and white tights that appeared to glow, and she would also tell me to go into the woods. Once again, it has a weird explanation behind it. The one I remember the clearest was my Nana has some toys for you to play with, but she will only give them to you if you go into the woods. These experiences stopped as soon as I moved out of that house. Recently I heard about a creature known as a skinwalker. It sounds very similar to this. However, I'm pretty sure a skinwalker can only change into animals. So it's still unclear. I still wonder what would have happened to me if I had gone out into the woods. My paranormal story. I am a 17-year-old female who has been able to see spirits and communicate with them since before I could talk. Growing up, my granddad John could see them too and would tell my family members that I would bring them to his house. My grandma, his wife, and granddad John lived 3 hours away from my family. When my granddad John passed away, my family and I went to the house to support my grandma and to help her with funeral arrangements. We stayed for 3 days, the day before the funeral, the day of the funeral, and the day after. On the night of the funeral, I slept in my deceased granddad's room, and when I woke up in the morning, I remembered my dream in which my granddad was standing over my bed, holding and swinging a black beaded cross. I went and asked everyone about the cross, and no one had any clue about it. I forgot about it, as I was known to have weird dreams like that. The night of the funeral, my mom and I were walking to bed when we heard my grandma scream my mom's name. We bolted downstairs to see my grandma standing in the kitchen washing up. When we asked her what was wrong, she was so confused, and when we asked her why she was screaming, she replied with, "I wasn't. I didn't hear screaming." My mom and I went to bed terrified. The next day everyone went out, and so I stayed at home. I got a biscuit from the cupboard above my granddad's seat and forgot to shut it behind me. I was always getting in trouble for not shutting that cupboard, so when my family got home, I ran to the kitchen to see it shut. It was a heavy wooden cupboard, so I was confused how I was sitting in the room next door and didn't hear it slam. I then thanked my granddad for saving me from getting in trouble. Now, when we got home from the 3 days away, I walked up to my bedroom to see the black beaded cross lying on my bed. I now keep this on my mirror, as I assume that it is for protection. To this day, this is one of the scariest experiences I've ever had. A tall shadow figure. Back in 2020, I was 13 at that time and was on vacation. I was staying at my cousin's house, and their backyard is full of mango trees, and not so far from the mango trees, there's a private property. More like a grass field but has a lot of tall bushes and a lake. We were playing that time with my cousin, and we rode bicycles until we reached the private property. We basically trespassed in it because there were no fences or gates, and that place was a perfect place to play. When we got there, I suddenly felt uneasy but just brushed it off and continued to play until I saw a tall black shadow figure standing from afar under the mango tree. My cousin also saw one not far from the one I saw. We weren't scared that time because we wanted them to play with us. When I was young, my parents always said that I had an imaginary friend and could talk to some spirits and could see one. When we got home, we noticed that it followed us, but we didn't think about it that much since we thought that they were our friends. Days passed, and we still played with them, we even talked to them, and sometimes they would often stand beside our bed watching us sleep. It was just fine, but one night, when I was throwing the trash outside, I saw another figure, and it scared me because it was so creepy and much taller than the previous one we'd seen. So I hurriedly go back inside and tell my cousin about it. Little did I know that that was the night that would start to turn my world upside down. I noticed that my cousin was acting different and started persuading me to come with her and attempt to end ourselves, and yes, we did attempt to end ourselves on that night. We sneak outside and start tying a rope on the mango tree to hang ourselves, but we didn't succeed because the dog almost bit us, and the dog was also acting strange. We decided to go to the highway and just let a truck hit us, but I hesitated because I was scared because from the other side of the road, I saw the creepy tall figure that scared me. But before I can say a word to my cousin, she already pulled me, which results in us crashing with the truck. Before losing consciousness, I see the tall figure that we considered a friend standing from afar, looking at me. When I regained consciousness, I was already at the hospital and waiting for a surgery to be taken. I was expecting that the tall shadow figure would show up when I woke up, but strangely, it didn't appear until now that I'm already 17. Until today I was wondering why we did that and what its connection was with the tall shadow figure I've seen. The ghosts are in my front yard. This happened to me a couple of years ago when I was about 14 or 15. I have an older sister who, a few months after this incident, has since moved out. I also have 2 cats and 3 dogs, and my mom was asleep at the time of this incident. My cats usually stay in my mom's room, and my dogs were lying in my living room with my sister and me. Since my sister was getting ready to move out, she had some cardboard boxes stacked in our kitchen. Someone or something moved the boxes, but since I'm a skeptic about this kind of stuff, I just assumed that the boxes just shifted because they weren't stacked perfectly on top of each other. A couple of years later, at about 2:30 a.m. I was lying in my bed watching videos. Out of nowhere, I hear someone knocking on my front door. I immediately think, who could be coming to our door at this hour? I got up, looked through the peephole, and saw no one, but they were still knocking. I went back to watching YouTube. Whoever it was had now resorted to pounding on my front door as if they were trying to run from something. I soon managed to fall asleep and woke up about 3:30 a.m. They were still knocking. I got up and looked out my curtains. What I saw still freaks me out to this day. I saw 2 tall, dark figures standing in my front yard. One of them started walking towards my window only to knock on my window and immediately vanish. Both figures were gone. It felt like they were there for hours, but when I checked the time, it was only about 3:32 a.m. I couldn't sleep the rest of the night, in fear of them coming back. It's been 1 year since I saw those figures. I'm hoping it stays that way. I've never had any paranormal experiences my entire life until that night. Heard a girl singing at 4 a.m. outside. One morning, I had to work pretty early, which resulted in me getting only about 4.5 hours of sleep instead of my usual 8 hours. As I was dressed and in my driveway, which was about 4 or 4:30 a.m., I opened my car door and took some trash out to throw in the bin real quick as my car warmed up. After I tossed out the trash and turned around towards my car, about 7 feet away from the trash bin, I heard clear singing of a young girl, maybe 6 to 9 years old, coming from what must have been directly behind my car. I stopped in my tracks, rather spooked for a minute, and then checked my phone to see if my Bluetooth had connected to my car and started playing something. My Bluetooth was off, and nothing was playing in my car. Being a 35-year-old adult male that I am, I honestly ran back inside for a minute to calm down and grab a LaCroix from the fridge. When I went back out, I didn't hear it, and I quickly got in my car and backed out of my driveway, heading to work. I guess my question is, did I really hear something, or was I just fatigued from only sleeping for 4.5 hours and being awake late at night? Well, morning, really. It was your stereotypical foggy darkness with the moon shining through the dark. I live in a neighborhood, and looking around, I didn't see any other cars on the road or any people leaving for work. It was pretty pitch quiet. I also should add that I was watching some creepy paranormal YouTube videos before getting out of bed to get ready for work. Perhaps the combination of fatigue and the eerie silence tricked my mind, but I could clearly hear a young girl singing. Couldn't make out the words, but it was fairly loud, enough to make me think it was coming from directly behind my car. One time when I was visiting my step-cousin's house, I was sitting in the living room by myself waiting to get picked up by my dad. My cousins and aunt had gone to the store, and my uncle was upstairs working on renovations. In the reflection of the TV, which was turned off and was an old tube TV with a glass screen, the silhouette of an old man was reflected in the glass, crouching behind the couch about a foot away from my head. I could only see his shoulders and up because he was behind the couch, which faced the foyer and the rest of the house. I was in disbelief at first, so I kept looking around to try and find anything that could have been causing the reflection. He was completely motionless. He remained motionless, leading me to believe that an inanimate object was responsible for the shadow. But there was absolutely nothing behind me or near me that could have been creating this perfectly humanoid silhouette, topped with thin, wispy hair, anywhere in the entire room. So I waved my arm around behind me in the spot where he would have been crouching, trying to make some sense of what I was seeing. And when I looked back into the reflection, he was in the same crouching position, only this time he was all the way across the room, crouching behind the dining room table. I never saw him move. He was just there when I turned to look back into the reflection. It was at this point that I finally realized that I was experiencing something paranormal. Even though I've always been a believer, my younger self, who was about 14 at the time, approached paranormal experiences with a healthy dose of skepticism. When weird things happen, my first instinct isn't to believe that it's something supernatural just because I can't explain it right away. Anyway, I finally got the creeps, and I went upstairs to my uncle. He noticed the look on my face and asked if I was okay. This is going to sound crazy, but I think I just saw a ghost downstairs. He smiled. Well, you know our house is haunted, right? No, Unc, I didn't know that, but that explains a lot. The scariest experience of my life, a true story at a sleepover when I was 15. I remember about 14 years ago when Slenderman was first taking off, my friends and I made a little game about it where one person plays Slenderman, and that person has to hide in the woods somewhere, in costume sometimes, and the players have to traverse through the woods without accidentally making eye contact, or you die in place. Once we played this game again together at a sleepover, we were 14 and 15, and it started out well enough. My friend Luke was Slenderman, and we were all sneaking through the wooded area on the property. The last thing I remember from the game of Slender itself was me and another friend successfully coming out the other side without losing, and we started to celebrate. Luke disengaged the costume and came out to congratulate us. But then we realized our other two friends were nowhere to be found. We kept on looking, and there was no one. We started yelling that it wasn't funny anymore and they should come out. Then my friend's dad came out and helped us look. We never found anyone. An hour and a half had passed. And we didn't have cell phones yet except for one person, so that didn't do any good. We were ducking petrified that Slender Man was real and ducking got them. I really had an eerie vibe that something paranormal was at play. I may have even cried about my friends. We decided to call the police, and right before the police got there, my two asshole friends came out of hiding. They were playing the ultimate prank on us and hiding on the adjacent golf course to make us think the real Slender Man was out and about and got them. We ducking did think that. It was horrifying, and we had to explain it away to the cops, who frowned at us and left. It was terrifying at the time, but now it's a treasured Halloween memory. This is a paranormal encounter my mother had. This is my mother's story, not my own. Basically it started when she was 10 or so. She had come home from school one day wanting to watch a Nickelodeon program. The sun had already set, and she was at home alone watching TV. From where she was sitting, there was a long hallway to her left. The room at the end of the hallway on the left belonged to our grandmother, her grandmother, my great-grandmother. She had heard her door open, and so she looked down the hall. She said she saw a silhouette that looked like our grandmother peeking out of the door. The TV was on in her room, so Mom couldn't really see the face of the person. Then after about 10 seconds, the silhouette went back in the room and closed the door. Mom finished her show and went to see if our grandmother was home, but when she entered the room, no one was there. The windows in this room were short and high up on the wall, so no one could really sneak out through them. At the time, my mom's 10-year-old brain just chalked it up to her 50-year-old grandmother climbing out the window somehow. I mean, it was probably difficult for a child to accept it being a ghost. She has had other paranormal encounters that she's told me about, but this one really stuck with me. But I think the fact that the silhouette looked like our grandmother makes it even creepier. Ghost or creature? So this story didn't really happen to me, per se. It happened to my sister, who at the time was 13. Now it's important to the story that I mention I'm the only boy out of 6 children. Okay, so when I was 5, my family and I had just moved into a new house with my then stepfather. The layout of the house was as follows: the front door immediately brought you to a hallway. On the left side of the hallway was the living room, which, by the way, we had just gotten the wooden floors buffed and polished. To the right of the hallway, there was a door that led to what used to be the garage. However, the previous owners had converted it into 2 separate rooms that included a bathroom. Straight down the hallway you could easily see the dining room. Next to the dining room was my and my other sister's room that we shared. And the kitchen was on the other side. Next to the kitchen was my stepfather's and mom's room. And further down from my room was my sister Dee's room. In the dining room there was a sliding glass door with a screen door that led to a back patio. We always kept it locked because my mom is very paranoid. It should also be mentioned that at the time we didn't really have a computer room, so we decided to just leave the laptop that my sister Jay owned on top of the dining room table. Now this particular night my sisters Jay and Dee decided to watch movies on the big screen TV, back then in 2005 that was like a movie theater screen. Sometime during the night they end up falling asleep. Now my sister Jay woke up feeling weird because she felt like she woke up for no reason. So she looks at her flip phone to see that the time was roughly 1 o'clock in the morning. Seeing the time, she tries to go back to sleep, but for some reason she just can't. Then, when it started to get closer to 2 in the morning, that's when it began. I started to hear tapping on the screen of the sliding door. My sister thought nothing of it, seeing as how we moved from the Bronx to Florida and we had heard that Florida was known for its raccoons. Then she heard the glass door open and close. Then the banging began. My sister said it sounded like someone had broken into the house and started messing with the cabinets, kind of like slamming them closed repeatedly. Then a tapping noise occurred, like as if someone was typing on the keyboard of the laptop. It continued like that for the next 10 to 15 minutes. The cabinets continued to bang, and the keyboards continued to tap. Now you remember how I said my little sister had just been born? Well, she was a relatively quiet baby. She never really cried in the middle of the night. She usually always slept soundly through the night. Though on this night, baby S starts to whine like someone is messing with her. She only whines for about a minute when a knocking on the kitchen table is heard. It sounded like when a parent is on the phone and wants to get your attention without saying your name out loud. Then my baby sister stops crying almost instantly. A couple more taps of the keyboard, and then finally all the noise stops. My sister Jay finally gets the courage to get up and tries to make a run for it to my mom's room. She wraps her blanket around her and starts to run but trips due to the newly done floorboards and scrapes her knee badly. She finally makes it to my mom's room and wakes her up and tells her everything that she heard. Naturally my mom and stepfather think someone has broken into the house, so they check it out. All of the cabinets are open, the laptop is open but not on and had never been on, and the sliding glass door is securely locked as always, but the screen door has 2 medium-sized scratches going down the middle. My mom wakes up me and the rest of my sisters, and we all end up sleeping in the living room together. We continued to sleep like that for about 2 more months of staying in that house. And that was just the beginning of weird occurrences. I live in a relatively small town in the southeast US. All throughout my 20s I'd often go to parties at this one particular home. It was huge, think 3,500 square feet, shared between 4 different renters. Everyone simply called it the Vatican, given that it was this giant white manor with a lot of history and a party house for 20-somethings. One of my friends ends up renting one of the rooms out, and it's this beautiful bedroom with 12-foot ceilings and a gigantic mirror that takes up nearly an entire wall. He kept having recurring dreams in that room where he'd be trapped in a fire and had really intense visions of a woman's presence. Now keep in mind that this person is like a hardcore skeptic, anti-spiritual, edgelord atheist type. The dreams were so bad that he moved out, and the landlord refused to rent that room to a man ever again, Supposedly this was a recurring instance with every guy that rented out that room with the giant mirror, but never an issue when a woman rented it. I'm talking to my friend one day and find out that her grandpa used to deliver groceries there when he was a kid, and that there was a very abusive doctor that owned the home and would lock his wife in the room with the mirror, keeping her under house arrest. I don't know the rest of the history or the fate of the couple, but it's a wild story. I feel so bad for the poor woman that suffered at the hands of her abusive husband. Something was in my childhood home. This was the experience I had in my childhood home. Currently, I no longer live in the same state where this occurred, but it still is something I think about and share often. Something I try not to think too much about at night, but I'm excited to share this story with you all. As a kid, I always believed that my childhood house was haunted. My first experience happened when I was around 13 years old. My mom drove me home after school, and I immediately went to the bathroom. As I sat there, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The doorknob moved slightly, and my heart skipped a beat. I peered under the crack of the door but saw no one there. As I continued to watch the door, I saw the knob begin to turn slowly, and I felt a wave of terror wash over me. The door creaked open, paused for a moment, and then slammed shut. I was frozen with fear, unable to move or comprehend what had just happened. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a series of chilling events that would haunt me for years to come. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, following me wherever I went in the home. One day, while taking a nap on my living room couch, I was startled awake by a tall, shadowy figure in the doorway. It was solid black and three-dimensional, with a skinny, emaciated appearance. After a second it came at me as if it was in stop motion, think claymation, and it was gone. The shadow figure began to make constant appearances in the house. I would see it from the corner of my eye or in the darkness around my home. When I was practicing the piano, deep in concentration, suddenly I felt like I was being watched. My heart started pounding in my chest as I turned to look towards the doorway, only to see a solid black head-shaped thing at the top of the doorway staring at me. I froze in terror, unable to move or look away. All I could see was the thing's head. This couldn't have been my parents. The doorways are around 7 to 8 feet tall. The thing's head then twists back into the hallway. The creature disappears from view. It only lasted a moment, but it was horrifying. It felt like I was living in a scary movie, and I kept feeling things were going to get worse. I was trying to keep this to myself, and things got worse when my mom and dad left town, which they did often. My friend's dad dropped me off back home and looked towards the window confused. "I thought your dad wasn't home." He did a double check and explained he saw a tall shadow figure. He described, in detail, exactly what I saw. It was scary and also validating to know I wasn't going crazy. The strange occurrences in my house had everyone on edge. My family started accusing me of inviting something sinister into our home because they too had started seeing unexplained things. The person most affected by this was my mom, who heard the basement door slam shut while she was alone in the house. I did everything I could to get rid of whatever was haunting us, but nothing seemed to work for long. It got to the point my mom had to jam the basement door with an object in the hinge so it wouldn't move. A heavy wooden door. When I turned 18, I had my first boyfriend, and we would always sleep in the spare bedroom in the basement. Both my parents left town. That night, as usual, my boyfriend put on a podcast to help him sleep. But when I woke up in the middle of the night, I heard a strange voice speaking from across the room. I was terrified and immediately checked his phone. His phone was off. My phone was off too. I could still hear the voice of a woman speaking, and I woke up my boyfriend in panic. He was half asleep and told me to turn off the podcast, but when I explained that the phones were already off, we both froze in fear and stared at the door, wondering what was happening. It was winter, 2 a.m., and no one was outside. The voice went away, and we both decided we had to investigate. We opened the door and saw nothing. We checked everywhere, and there were no footprints in the snow outside. It didn't make sense. Luckily I didn't have to stay in that house much longer. I went to college that summer and didn't have anything happen after I moved away. At least not happening to me. When I came back home for winter break, my sister put my niece down for a nap in the spare bedroom. My niece woke up screaming and was inconsolable. The next day she told my mom about the scary, skinny shadow figure in the doorway. It's been over 6 years now with nothing new happening. I frankly don't miss anything about whatever it was that was in my home. Upon reflection, I wonder if there was something there as a result of all the fighting that was happening. My parents were on the brink of divorce, and I was dealing with school, drama, and then whatever this thing was. I haven't stayed in the house long enough after leaving to explore that possibility. If anyone else can explain what this thing was or share their own experiences with shadow people, I'd be interested in hearing it. Paranormal activity. To start out this story, I want to let you know that this is still happening, but nothing life-threatening has happened up to this point. Another thing is my house has 2 stories and a basement. The second story has my bedroom on the left, the bathroom in the middle, and my parents' room on the right. The first floor has the kitchen, which has a door that leads to the hallway. That hallway has my mom's craft room, the basement, and the other bathroom. I don't exactly remember the order that these events happened, but I do remember how creeped out we were when the first strange event happened. There were 2 people who used to live in our house before us. I'll call them M and F for privacy reasons. Mom's craft room used to be F's bedroom. Up until M died, nothing happened in our house, but after M died, weird things started happening, such as doors slamming on their own and TVs turning themselves on every 15 minutes. After F died, even weirder things started happening. All 3 doors upstairs started slamming on their own. Once in Mom's craft room, she put a glue bottle standing straight up on her desk, and it kept falling over on its own. The weird part is no windows were open and the desk is level. One of the weirder ones is when Mom and Dad were in the craft room, they thought they heard and saw me go into the bathroom. After Dad tried to ask me if I was okay, he went in there to discover that no one was in there. At the time they saw this, I was in the living room. This happened a few days ago. We had gotten a new dog recently, and Mom always has it with her. Mom was in the craft room with the dog working on a project. She felt something breathing on her. When she turned around, the dog was lying on the ground asleep. Another incident was when Dad was upstairs. He again thought that someone went into the bathroom. He saw an outline of a person walking up the stairs and going into the bathroom. That's all the paranormal events that have happened up to this point. Stull Cemetery. I initially believed that staying in the car would keep me safe. However, that turned out to be a misconception. So this happened in Kansas yet again. So my friends asked me if I wanted to go check this haunted graveyard out. It was like a 25 to 30 minutes drive from us, called Stull Cemetery, 8th Gate of Hell, in Stull, Kansas. Yeah, no, was my response, and I was standing firm on that. But being kind of curious, I decided to Google it and see what it was about. So, legend has it. A long time ago, a witch danced with the devil at this cemetery, and a child was conceived. They used to meet there every now and again by this tree. Well, when the baby was born, it was very deformed and didn't make it, so they say it was buried at this tree. There was a church there at the time, but it has been torn down since then. This church only has steps in it, and they go straight down, and it is said that when you go down them, it only seems like 5 minutes, but when you come back, it's been like 5 days. Also, there is no roof, and when it rains, it falls off like there is a roof. There is more they say happens, but you can Google that. Okay, back to my terrible decision. Well, one night after the bar closed, I drove some girls back because I was DD. Just so you know, I was completely sober. Guess who was in our driveway? Yup, my 3 friends were drunk and wanted me to drive them out there. I told them that I was tired and that they needed to go pass out, but they responded, "Fine, we will just drive ourselves." Well, shit, play that card, damn it. I can't let them do that because if anything happened, I would feel bad. So I said, "Fine, but I'm not getting out of the car." So I run up to my room and grab sage and holy water. I figured, yeah, I'll be fine. It's like 2:30 a.m., and off we go. We get to Stull and have to drive through this little quiet town where everyone is asleep. We reach the town's end and stand atop a hill that descends into darkness. Now off to the left is a trailer and a new church, and off to the right are these trees, the cemetery, and the old church. Now, in the meantime, these guys are getting kind of scared and are talking about not going. Me, yeah, nope. You all made me drive out here. Someone is going in there. So we drive by first, and it looks hella creepy, like goosebumps all over my body creepy. Now I'm like, where am I going to park? They said the tree line we passed had an overgrown driveway. So I turn around, find it, and back into the driveway, where we are pretty much covered by trees now. They jump off but run back because a car is coming. Here the sheriff drives by kind of slow. I figured they must have seen us come out this way. So we wait, and he just keeps driving and disappears over the hill. Okay, so now they jump off and disappear around the corner of the trees and are gone. So I'm sitting here alone in the dark with music playing and, of course, smoking a cigarette. When I tell you I got this bad feeling like someone was behind the car, my stomach dropped, all the hair on my body stood straight up, and I didn't want to look in the rearview mirror. Terror swept over my body, and I flipped the mirror up, lit my sage, and when I grabbed my holy water, something hit the back of the car 3 times and shook the whole damn car. I closed my eyes and started crying and praying. Then here come these three jumping in, telling me to peel out, say no more. Off I go, no lights on, dust and grass flying all over the place. I didn't tell them what happened yet, but I asked them. They said in the trees where I was parked, they heard something big walking, breaking branches, and talking, a growl, and then a scream. They thought it was me, but I didn't scream. Mind you, this all happened within like 5 to 7 minutes. One of them was like, "Nah, go back, we didn't get to see anything." "Aw hell nah, are you serious?" I never learn, so I was like, "Okay, I'm going to park by the church across from the cemetery, and I'll be safe and can see everything this time." I pull in and park, church behind me, cemetery across the street. I'm good. So they grab a flashlight and tell me, "We will flash you 3 times to let you know where we are." Okay, bet. So off they go, running across the street and through a hole in the fence. Now I see them go back towards the tree line and disappear in the dark. So I'm looking around to make sure no cars are coming, because that sheriff never came back yet, and checking out the cemetery. So the old church sits on top of a hill, and the headstones are all over below it. Now my friends ran to the right and on the left. Going up this hill, I see someone climbing up it and run behind the church. I said, "Damn, these guys are brave," they split up. Then from what looks like inside the church through the windows, I'm assuming the windows are broken out and the door is gone, I see 3 flashes, so I flash them back with my headlight. All of a sudden all 3 of them came running across the street, hopped in, and said to get the hell out of there. I was so confused, they didn't say anything for the first 10 minutes. Finally, I asked what happened. They said they heard walking and talking in the cemetery but couldn't tell where it was coming from. Then they saw this tall black figure standing up by the church, saw me flash my lights, and heard a scary scream again, got spooked, and ran out. Wait. You all didn't split up? No one ran around the back of the church and flashed me 3 times? They were like, "What are you talking about?" So I told them what happened the first and second times. It got all silent, and all I said was shit. I thought I was going to be safe in the car. We got back to campus around 5 a.m. and never spoke about it again. The shit I get myself into. Back in about 2008 I rented a room in my friend's house. I have a few stories from that place but this one to me is the craziest. The house had been split into 2, one side was like a studio apartment, and our side was 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a kitchen, and a living room. I rented 1 bedroom, my roommate and her boyfriend shared the master bedroom, and her uncle rented the 3rd bedroom. All 3 bedrooms were located at the end of a hallway. On this day I was the only one home. I was in the living room watching TV. The way it was set up was the TV was a large, probably 65-inch one that was mounted up above a fireplace. The reflection of the TV showed the couch and the entrance to the hallway. So I'm watching TV, and at one point the screen went black, like at the end of a show when it's going into the commercial break. In the reflection at the entrance of the hallway, I see somebody wearing full army fatigues. My roommate's boyfriend had served in the army, so I thought it was him, but at the same time, the person in the reflection looked white, and the boyfriend was Hispanic, and I was like, why the TF would he be standing there in his uniform? I turned my head to the right to look at the hallway entrance, and of course nobody was there. I also want to mention that at that point the name James popped into my head for no reason at all. Or so I thought. Anyway, fast forward a couple of hours, and my roommate and her boyfriend come home. Her boyfriend goes in the room to take a shower because he had just come from work. I tell her what I saw and ask her if the name James means anything. She goes completely pale and calls her boyfriend into the living room as soon as he gets out of the shower. I then tell her boyfriend and bring up his name, James. He starts getting emotional instantly. When he was serving, his unit was shot at. One of his friends was hit, and he died in his arms. His friend's name, well, I'll let you all guess that one. Spooky ghost encounters? So I just want to point out I am by no means a believer in this stuff in the strong sense and will get nothing out of lying to get some attention or any of that rubbish. I just realized my life has been pretty subpar for the most part, however, this one encounter is quite a tale in my life. Let's go. So I used to, in the summer or various other holidays, go to stay round my cousin's house in Leicester whenever I could because we loved each other's company, and he was, bar one other person, the coolest mate I had at that age. Anyway, his house seemed pretty old, nothing like a spooky mansion or anything. I mean, it was a modern home, but from the stonework and the local buildings, it looked like an old, decrepit area. Anyway, he had a staircase in the dining room that led around and up to a giant hallway, which for some reason was always barren, meaning it had nothing in it, no pictures or drawers or cabinets, etc., and I'm guessing I know now why that is, but as a kid you pay no attention to any of that. Anyway, all I remember was that giant hallway, which always seemed to me to be cold, and the vibe was off, meaning I always felt uncomfortable and strange, but being a kid, I could not put my finger on it, so I always used to ask a parent if they could accompany me to the toilet because it was on the other side of this hallway, and bear in mind when I say hallway, it's like a giant square one, not a typical rectangular narrow one, like it could be a whole bedroom if it wanted. So anyway, sometimes parents would come, and sometimes they would say, "Go on your own, we are all down here, so nothing's going to happen." So I always remember either calming myself, talking to myself, or running across it, and as soon as I got to the toilet and closed the door, I felt safe again, and that uncomfortable feeling went away, although I hated the idea of going across it again. Also, I remember waiting for my cousin to finish school because ours finished a day earlier than theirs sometimes, so I went to wait in his sister's room right next to that hallway, and I remember it always feeling off. Considering the hallway was next to us, and lastly, my cousin lived in the loft, meaning he had stairs that went down into that hallway, and his bed faced it, meaning you could look down into said hallway, meaning I was on a double-edged sword, meaning I either slept with my back to it, which put me on the edge of a sword as you face the stairs where a face could pop out between the barriers, which never did from memory, but it could have. Anyway, to the incident, I think I've explored enough context for you to get the idea and build the place in your mind, so it goes like this. The parents left us with the older sister while they went out, meaning the house was parentless, and we heard this loud bang and crashing noise upstairs, so we all looked at each other and went, "What was that?" The older sister said, "Stay behind me," whilst we went upstairs to check it, thinking it could be a burglar or something, but unlikely as it's a hard place to rob based on the house design, and all of us, and I mean all my sister, his sister, and even the dog, went upstairs together. I mean, we looked like a stand-in crew for a Scooby-Doo episode when this opaque white figure, the typical white ghost in a sheet design, went woo and came right towards us in a flash and right through us, which we all freaked and got an icy chill, and it laughed as it went around the corner, and when it hit the light after going down the stairs, I could see a shadow and hear laughter. When the parents came back, we told them what happened, but they didn't believe us and told us we made it up. Do you think we saw a ghost? Was that place haunted? I think something is outside of my home. I just moved to Oklahoma. Recently, I have been having very uncomfortable experiences outside, especially in the evening or nighttime. It started when I went to go put laundry in the wash one day. We have a laundry room attached to our building, and it was broad daylight, so I wasn't exactly feeling nervous about anything. I got about 20 feet from the walkway/alleyway to the washroom, and I smelled the worst rotting animal smell I've ever smelled in my life. Not only that, as soon as I smelled it, I got the strongest fight or flight reaction I've ever felt. I ran back to my unit, locked the door, and had a small anxiety attack. I waited about 15 to 20 minutes before going back out, and when I did, there was no smell, and I felt normal. Fast forward to about a week later. My husband and I were outside at about 1 a.m. smoking a cigarette when we heard what sounded like a dying dog. Given that we reside near a major interstate, we presumed that an animal had sustained damage. We started walking toward the source of the noise, which was a sort of wheezing whine, a terribly sad sound, until we reached the edge of our parking lot. As we got onto the pavement, the wheezing dog noise turned into what sounded like an owl hooting. I understand owls make strange noises. I was raised in Texas, I've heard many, but this was not an owl. The longer we listened to it, the more it sounded like a person trying to mimic an owl. My husband called out, "Hey, is someone there?" pretty loudly, and just silence was the response. We stood quiet a few moments before the owl noise completely stopped, and the sound of an unnatural laugh echoed from the trees. The only way I can describe this noise is it was like when a deaf person laughs, like they can't hear how they sound, so it just kind of sounds a bit off. I don't mean to sound rude at all, truly, that's just the only way I know how to describe it. It felt like ice water was in my veins as soon as I heard it. Both of us just felt extreme fear in that moment and ran back to the house. I could explain all of these things if I hadn't seen what I had seen next. A few days later, I was outside smoking around 7 p.m., and I saw two men walking on the side of the street where I had heard the noise a few nights prior. They walked past the trees a little ways but then stopped. It was dusk, so light was low. One of them turned on their phone light and shined it into the trees before jumping back. Both men took off at a full sprint away from the tree line. I have no idea what they saw, I didn't hear anything, but there was pure fear there. The most frustrating part was I was looking right at them and saw absolutely nothing. Fast forward to about a week later. I get a text while I'm at work from my husband telling me he heard our daughter talking and laughing in the field across the street. He was 100% sure it was her until he realized she was inside in her room. He said it sounded just like her. Fast forward again a few days later. I found dried blood on my door jamb, as well as scratches near my doorknob, and more dried blood at the bottom of my door. My neighbor had their internet cables cut and told me that someone had tried to open their door the night it happened and then slammed their body against the door trying to break in. My neighbor said he forced himself out the door, ready to confront whoever was there, but there was no one. We constantly hear things on the roof and things in the alley behind our place. Our dog will run to the door at random hours and sniff and growl like someone is there. I have probably made a mistake by calling out to this thing, whistling at night, and trying to antagonize it because I desperately want a recording. I have one recording of its noises. It sounds like an owl, but towards the end there's this low, inexplicable moan that comes from the same place the owl sounds are coming from. It's difficult to hear and ends very abruptly. I don't feel like this is good enough. No one believes me, but something is out there. It knows I know it, I feel it watching me. If I curse at it or try to lure it out, it goes completely silent, or it does that horrible laugh. I can never seem to catch the laugh, or any of the noises. As soon as I hit record, it usually stops. I don't know how to explain this, but I know I'm not crazy. I would greatly appreciate any help, as I genuinely want to understand what this phenomenon is. It always smells like a corpse when it's around. That's the biggest sign something isn't right. I brought it up to one of my native co-workers, and he said, "Leave it be. Wash the blood from your door, and stop trying to talk to it." He wouldn't tell me anything else. I don't know if the creature is a Wendigo, a skinwalker, or something else entirely, but I have never felt such dread and fear as I do when I hear or smell it out there. Please, someone, anyone, if you know what this is, tell me I'm not losing my mind, and if it's real, how do I make it go away? This thing is causing me so much stress. Thank you for listening. A ghost is chasing me. I'm Loic. I'm originally from France and 33 years old. Some details I've forgotten about or that I don't remember very well will not be counted in the story so that they stay perfectly true to my experience. This story is going to be quite long and begins when I was 9 years old. We moved to a new house located in the south of France called Ritzville. The house was an extension of the city's castle. I loved it immediately when we moved in. It was a 3-floor house with the traditional European medieval architecture. I was feeling like I was a prince. Since it was so big, I was always exploring it and soon realized that the 3rd floor was a lot smaller than the other 2 floors. So I kept searching, thinking I could find a secret passage or door somewhere. It took me quite a few weeks, but finally I found it. So I started to explore and got into a small room. It was full of dust and spider webs, with wooden boxes everywhere. Inside it, there was loads of old and useless stuff, and in one of them, I found a giant stone, like a thumbstone, with figures sculpted in it and weird inscriptions. At that time, I didn't know it was Latin. It was just beautiful, I was so impressed by it. And I kept exploring a bit more of the boxes when finally my mother called me for lunch, so I left. I kept coming back a few times, and when I finished exploring it, I moved on. That's when it all started. I started not to sleep well. I sensed a presence in the room, as if someone was watching me closely. Before that, I was always sleeping in deep dark, and I had to start to leave the lights on to be able to sleep. I remember I was very perfectionist, totally the opposite of what I am now, and I had a part of my wall decorated with kinder surprise figures. I was collecting it all, and I had, like, 60 or 70 of them. Imagine my teeth. It was all in a specific order, and one morning, I noticed it was all completely moved. So, I put it back in its position. And every morning, some figures would have exchanged positions. I was very mature for my age, so I never considered the possibility of it being a boogeyman or something similar. I never believed in anything that wasn't found in an encyclopedia. Yes, the internet and Wikipedia were not yet common knowledge. Then, in the middle of the night, a voice woke me up. I thought it was my stepfather waking me up to go to school, but no one was in the room. And it was 3 a.m. At that point, I thought of a dream. And it stopped. For a while. I began to forget about that story and turned off the lights again to go to sleep. Until one night. I was awakened by the same voice, and I will never forget the lights in the darkness. I still don't know if it was eyes, but it creeped me out. I turned on the lights. It was 3:01 a.m. From that day on, I was awakened every night at 3 a.m. by a nightmare. I was falling down from a building and would open my eyes when I hit the ground. But no more voices, no more lights in the dark, nothing. All I could feel was a sense of unease and a lack of safety. I experienced a sense of not being alone. A few months later, we went on holidays in Portugal with my parents, and they decided to move there. It changed my life. The heavy feeling had dissipated, and I no longer woke up in the middle of the night. Until I came back to France and moved into my apartment in the northeast of France in 2015. The heavy feeling, noises, and voices started to come back at night. And one night, I saw it. It was at the bottom of my bed, and it called my name. At that point, I did not only see its eyes, I saw a face. It creeped me out to death. I remember all my body hair and my hair straightening, that feeling of cold and sweating. I had to move out of there. And I did. I found a new apartment, located 20 kilometers away from my previous one. And it started again. At that, I joined the steps during the night, which I was not aware of until my neighbors told me about it. They thought I was sleepwalking because they heard me walking in circles every night for more than an hour at 3 a.m. So I called a medium to come to my apartment. As I've always been very skeptical of this kind of thing, I told her to come for a card reading, and she got in a few minutes and then refused to go on. Staying in front of the door, she told me about a spirit in the house, very protective over me but very angry at other people. She told me that I should leave the apartment and make a line with salt on the door before leaving so that I trapped it inside the apartment. Which I didn't when I left. Now I've been living in Greece for the last 3 years, and everything's going well, as long as I don't give attention to it, but lately, she started to call the attention on her again. Has anyone ever lived in a situation like this and gotten free of it? Because even though the medium told me a few years ago she's protective over me, she's freaking me out sometimes. What did I see that night? Please help. A few nights ago, I woke up just before sunrise. I sleep on the top bunk, and when I opened my eyes, I saw something in the room. It looked humanoid but long and slender. It was hard to see, but I could tell its head was down because it was so tall it hit the ceiling. I know some of you will say, oh, it was just a dream, or sleep paralysis, but it wasn't. I could move. I could talk. I was fully awake. The first thing I did was call out to my mom. She didn't answer, which was strange because she's a very light sleeper. I knew she was there because I could hear her snoring. There's something else I should mention. We keep a small cross above the door in our room. It's been there for 14 years and never moved. But the night before this happened, it fell. Back to the creature. It looked like it was breathing heavily, maybe even panting, like a dog. After that night, I woke up sweaty and out of breath. And ever since, I've had the constant feeling that someone is watching me. I don't know whether it's just paranoia or something more. There's a window across from my bed. It faces another house, and some of their windows line up with mine. Today, I swear I saw something watching me from one of those windows. It looked like the same creature, tall and crouching. As soon as I noticed it, it slowly moved backward and disappeared. It didn't move to the side, but rather, it retreated, as if vanishing into the obscurity. I honestly don't know how I'm going to sleep tonight. I thought writing this down might help calm me, but it just worsened it. If anyone has any idea what I saw, please let me know. Furthermore, the creature looked blurry, like my eyes couldn't focus on it. I don't know how else to describe it, it was like my brain didn't want to see it clearly. A little paranormal investigation I did almost a year ago. This took place in early to mid-July 2012 in northern Kentucky. Keep in mind, we were two 13-14-year-old girls, armed only with the crappy recorder on my MP3 player and my basic understanding of how investigations of this nature work. We had gone down to Kentucky for a mission trip to help a poor community. We were there with a small church. We had brought a bunch of donated items and given them away, along with entertaining children for a few hours. We were staying in the gymnasium of the local high school. There were 2 locker rooms, one on either side of the gym. The afternoon after the main event, we were all leaving to eat. I was the last one out of the gym. It felt as if someone was watching me, so I turned around. About 15 to 20 feet away I saw a humanoid figure. The gym was dark, so all I saw was a silhouette. I blinked, and it was gone. Normally I would have investigated further, but I had to catch up with the others. Later I was telling Marie, not her real name, I don't feel comfortable with putting her name up, the only other teenager on the trip, about what I saw. She told me that she had heard some things in the girls' locker room. Naturally, being curious kids, we decided to investigate. We decided to record EVPs on my MP3 player. We asked questions, the usual shabam, no answer. The only activity we got was a light that had been normal the entire time that we had been there started acting weird, and Marie saw a shadow in one of the shower stalls. She also put her iPod in the middle of the floor and invited anyone who was there to do something with it. She had just put it down when it lit up. We tried to get it to happen again, but nothing happened. She insists that she didn't push the button, but I am uncertain about that. We did another session in the shower stall that she had seen the figure in. That one was much shorter because we were both creeped out in there. We kept hearing knocking and dragging sounds. When we later listened to the recording, we heard me ask the question, "Is there anyone in here?" A few seconds afterwards, in a quiet voice, we heard Rachel. Rachel just happens to be my name, so that did shake me. We each listened to it a few times, both of us hearing it. Then once we listened to it, but that part was gone. Just white noise. It had been obvious before, it just vanished from the recording. We then referred to the supposed spirit as Rachel, and we got results. Knocking, banging, lights flickering, shadows. Sadly, we were being stupid and didn't record that session. We then left the locker room and went back where everyone was in the gym. During the night, we kept hearing footsteps in the bleachers, and we heard a banging sound from one of the closets. It sounded like someone was inside and couldn't get out. We didn't have the key, so we couldn't open the door. It stopped eventually. The next day one of the men discovered a lot of water on the floor, coming out of the closet. We decided that one of the pipes must have burst. Anyway, I'm going back next month for the trip again. I might try to see if I can find anything else, but I doubt it. Creature I saw outside my bedroom window. I was somewhere between the ages of 10 and 14 when this happened. Growing up, I lived on a very boring street in a middle-class, one-story house. My bedroom faced the front veranda, which had a lot of plants. A study, serving as a spare room and computer room, was located just around the corner and down the hall from my bedroom. I used to watch TV in that room, and on this particular night it was very hot, so I had opened the door to the veranda. There was a thin fly screen with no lock, which we would pull across when that door was open. When I went to bed, it was so hot that I kept my bedroom windows and curtains wide open. I was having trouble sleeping and lay there staring at the ceiling. Then I heard what sounded like someone walking around on the veranda. The ground was cement pebbles, and there was a lot of dirt from the pot plants, and it made a very distinct sound when you walked on it. I thought it was one of my parents, but it was late at night, so that didn't make sense. I craned my neck to look out the window. In the dark I saw a gaunt, skeletal, hunched-over figure slowly shuffling towards my bedroom window. It made a raspy sound as it shuffled around. I was fairly certain it couldn't see me, but from the way its head was moving, it looked like it was searching for something. Despite this fairly creepy thing happening outside my bedroom window, I still felt somewhat safe in the comfort of my bed inside my locked house. Then I realized I had left the study door open. All that stood between whatever the hell this thing was and my house was a thin screen door with no lock. I knew I had to lock that door, and fast. This thing was almost at my bedroom window and would soon be at the study door. I slid out of bed and crawled on my stomach out of my room and down the hall to the study. As I reached the door, intending to quickly close it, I realized my mistake. I would have to open the screen door to reach the door to close it. From where I was lying, I could see this thing hunched over and peering into my bedroom window. I think it heard or sensed me lying there because it turned and shuffled over and bent down to where I was lying. I held my breath as this thing put its face right against the screen and peered in at me, its raspy breath sounding like death. In the dark I could make out part of a face. It looked gaunt and sickly, either with very thin or no skin. I couldn't see any eyes, or they were simply empty sockets. I didn't move as its face pressed up against the fly screen, seemingly looking right at me. Suddenly, its face distorted in terror as its eye sockets and mouth opened wide, and it let out a blood-curdling shriek that sounded like fear before bolting off into the night. I lay there silently, frozen in fear and disbelief over what had just happened, and listening to make sure it was gone. As soon as I dared to move, I quickly opened the fly screen and shut and locked that veranda door. I then went back to my room and shut the windows and drew the curtains. I kept peeking through the curtain, expecting it to come back, but it never did. I've thought about this encounter ever since, and I've never really been sure what to make of it. I've never told anyone about it either. I didn't know where to begin, and I've never understood why it reacted in fear when it saw me. Girl in the white dress. This story isn't as scary as some heard on here, but it was the first time I remember seeing something that proved the paranormal was real. When I was about 10 years old, I had only stayed the night at my friend's house, let's call her Grace, a few times before this experience happened. Now I'm going to explain the layout of the house because I believe it's important to understand why I don't think it was my friend messing with me. Grace had a 2-story house. The kitchen, her parents' room, and the living room were all upstairs, and the bathroom, laundry room and her brother's room were downstairs. I had always had sort of an uneasy feeling when I would stay the night at Grace's house, feelings of being watched in the laundry room, which was also the computer room, when we would play on her computer in there, and at night when we would go to sleep in her room. I was also afraid of the dark when I was younger, so I'm sure that didn't help. One night Grace and her mom were both upstairs talking and cleaning up after dinner. I had already finished my task of getting the dishes off the table and in the dishwasher, so I decided to go get ready for bed and use the bathroom. As I was using the bathroom, I heard a knock on the door, and so I said, "Someone's in here." No reply or anything, just silence. I finished up, washed my hands, and decided to start brushing my teeth. Suddenly, there was another knock. Again, I said, "Someone's in here," and again, no reply, but instead, a second knock sounded on the door. I thought it was her brother messing with me, so I opened the door, and at first nothing was there, but I poked my head out, and when I did, I saw someone running away towards the computer room. It was a woman, her skin was see-through like a ghost. She had long black hair and a long white dress on. I hurried up and spat out my toothpaste into the sink and ran upstairs to see if Grace was messing with me, even though she had slightly shorter and lighter hair than what I'd seen, but she was still talking with her mom and had her PJs on, which weren't any type of nightgown, so I don't think it was her. I asked if she had just been downstairs, to which she said no, so I told her mom what I had seen. Luckily, she believed me, and her mom decided to bless the house that night, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me all night long as though it didn't work, and I don't think it did, because that woman followed me into my dreams for years. I would wake suddenly sweating and sometimes even crying from nightmares of her chasing me through dark hallways and rooms inside a house I've never seen before. I'd feel panicky and terrified just running aimlessly around this house trying to get away from her. It suddenly stopped a few years ago, and I didn't have any more dreams up until a few months ago. Luckily I haven't had any more since then. I believe that the entire experience expanded my perspective, as I have had several paranormal encounters since then. However, none have been similar to that night or those dreams, and I never want to see that woman again. This is my telling of the worst few months of my life, ending with the most terrifying experience I have ever witnessed. It was my 8th grade year. I was a very shy girl, but I had a little circle of friends. We would all take turns hosting sleepovers, and most of them got boring, so we would come up with various activities to do for the night. Occasionally we would rent horror movies, or explore the woods, try to sneak a little brandy from the cabinet, etc. On this particular weekend, it was my friend's, we can call her Kat, turn to host. At that time, Kat was my closest friend, living in a spacious home with a fully developed basement. Everyone enjoyed her hosting because it provided a safe haven from parents' prying eyes, allowed us to be as loud as we wanted, and generally allowed us to enjoy ourselves. So, it was that Friday during lunch hour Kat told the group she bought a glow-in-the-dark Ouija board from Kmart the night before. I was thinking, finally, someone is offering something that sounds interesting. The supernatural has always been of interest to me, and I have had experiences previous to playing the Ouija board. Although all other experiences I have had throughout my lifetime pale in comparison to the one I am discussing, they have still very much defined my openness to the idea of the spiritual realm from a young age. But a glow-in-the-dark Kmart Ouija board? That's a kid's game, a harmless joke. So, let's play. It's the end of the school day. I walk with Kat to her house, and we get everything ready for the sleepover in the basement. Her dad made us snack trays, 6 cases of sodas, and pixie sticks. We have everything. We were just waiting for all the other girls to show up. As the girls started to arrive, my anticipation for this Ouija board was building up. I started to fidget, and then one of the girls said, "Get the board, I want to see it." I'm like, "Yes." I was relieved that someone else suggested it instead of me. Kat pulls the game out of the next room, and when the girls and I see it, we laugh. It is completely marketed for children, and we can't keep a straight face while reading the instructions. Nevertheless, we set the ambience, turning off every light but a corner lamp, and 4 girls sat cross-legged around this harmless, glowing board. At first, we were all being silly, asking random questions and getting responses we knew were coming from one of our own. I grew a little tired of the banter and decided to set a more serious tone, telling my friends to stop moving the planchette. It took a few moments, but we gathered all the maturity we could muster at that age and started to ask purposeful questions. "Is there someone who wants to communicate with us?" one of the girls asked. The planchette moved to yes. "What is your name?" I asked. The planchette moved and spelled Bob. One of my friends had enough at this point and wanted the board put away. We glided the planchette over goodbye and put it away, ending my first experience with the board. We all went about our usual business. Nothing strange or extraordinary happened to any of us. But I did feel drawn to this board and wanted to play again. A week later, I would get my chance. Kat invited me over to hang out in her basement, watch movies, and possibly play with the board. We walked to her house, grabbed some snacks, and went downstairs. It wasn't long before she brought out the Kmart board, and we set up to play. I happened to be waiting for my boyfriend to call her house so he and I could talk. Now, this is in the 90s, it was not unusual for that to happen considering no one had a cell phone. We asked light questions, trying to keep it a little playful. I asked, "When is my boyfriend going to call?" The response was, 7 minutes. We both looked at the digital clock in the corner of the room, noticed the time, and waited the 7 long minutes. The phone rang precisely 7 minutes later. Kat and I began to panic, rising to our feet and shouting at one another. It was a complete episode of mania. We answered the phone after a few rings, and who was on the line? My boyfriend. I couldn't have a conversation with him at that point. I was on level 10, and I told him I would call him back when I got home that night. Although that was the last time I touched that board, it was not the end of my troubles. Later, I lived in a 2-story house at the time and had the entire upstairs to myself. That may seem like an enjoyable idea, having an entire upstairs to yourself, but not when you're me. I had been hearing what sounded like footsteps coming up my stairs on numerous occasions before experiencing this board. However, the events that transpired a few nights after I last tampered with the spirit board were nothing compared to the chaos. On the first night following the 7 minutes experience, I couldn't ignore the feeling of dread that washed over me as I brushed my teeth and climbed the stairs to my bed, alone. Shit. It took me a while, and as I waited to let myself slowly slip into sleep, I looked around my room. My breath started to quicken and get heavier. My body started to sweat and shake, my pulse was rising fast. It was my body responding to something I couldn't see. I was having a panic attack, but nothing was there. I felt the darkness in my room creep over me. Like a blanket, this darkness looked as if it was coming from the corners of my room and merging to form a mass on top of me. Is my vision deceiving me? Is this how one experiences a panic attack in the dark? I start to calm myself down. I deliberately breathe in and out very slowly, and my heart rate goes down, and I stop sweating. I never close my eyes, I have to see what's coming, no matter how terrifying. This mass has wrapped around my vision. It took all the light out of my room and enveloped me in the darkest of darkness. I lay there, knowing I wasn't sleeping, blinking my eyes over and over again, hoping it was just a trick of the eyes. I waited there for what felt like an hour, staring into darkness, until I fell asleep. Night after night for weeks. This went on. Sometimes, I would wake up because there were whispered conversations above my bed. Every time I turned to face the hallway, I noticed a shadow hovering near my bedroom light switch. I knew the first time I saw this shadow, it was Bob. Now, old Bobby must have known me pretty well. He had me trapped. He was in the middle of me and my exit. There was no way in ducking hell I was getting up to turn on my light, let alone running past this thing to get to safety. He had chosen the ideal location. So, what did I do? I stared at him until I fell asleep. One night, I mentally could not handle going through the bullshit, so I slept on the living room couch. I had enough and let Bob chase me out of my room. I fell asleep rather quickly, thinking I had somehow outsmarted the fellow by being downstairs because I didn't feel or see anything. I woke up in the early hours of the morning, choking. I'm coughing and choking and trying to catch my breath. I'm still half asleep when I see the light turn on in the kitchen. To illustrate, I'm dozing off on the living room couch, with a view into the kitchen/dining room from my position. So, the light turns on, and thinking it's my mom, I call out to her. I get no response. I call out to her again, and that's when I notice a shadow rising from the floor in the kitchen. I stare, unmoving, unblinking, not able to make a sound. A shadow person, that thick mass of darkness I had seen in my room for weeks, had a form. It seemed to have a head, shoulders, arms, and legs, but only the silhouette. A person wearing a long black robe with a hood. No semblance of a face, just empty darkness in its place. I felt nauseated as it glided across the kitchen floor, heading towards me very slowly and menacingly. Unable to look away, I watched as this mass of darkness descended upon me. As it got close to the foot of the couch, I thought it was going to snatch me up and drag me to hell. I could only wait for the inevitable and watch this creature gracefully come to take my soul. And just before he made it to my feet, that thing dipped into the floor and disappeared. I was still unable to scream for a few seconds after that. When I attempted to scream, my voice came out in whispers. When I regained my ability to use my vocal cord, I screamed for my mother. She came out of her bedroom, and seeing me crying and freaking out, she asked what was wrong. I told her the story, and she responded the way all parents do, telling me it was a dream. I would have believed her, but the kitchen light was still on. To this day, I have experiences, and I have come to accept it. I have learned that you should not use the Ouija board if you know nothing about it. It can be a tool if used in the right way, but I will never use one again. This is a true story about the scariest night of my life. Backstory: when I was around 17, I became genuinely interested in exploring abandoned buildings. I had a group of friends, and together we would search for abandoned buildings within a 200-mile radius, planning how many we could explore in one night, usually 2 or 3. Every single weekend we'd go to these places. We'd head out around 10 p.m. and not return home until about 5 a.m. We would all Google the places we wanted to go and find some more along the way. At this point we had been to a ton of places and never experienced anything paranormal or haunted. All of my friends were skeptics, disbelieving in ghosts, haunted things, and similar beliefs. I had some belief in ghosts and paranormal phenomena, but I never truly expected to experience anything myself. That said, most of us were atheists or skeptics, so it was hard to scare us. Main story: this particular night we found an abandoned girls' boarding school that had closed down sometime around the early 2000s and had sat abandoned for many years. We decided we were going to explore this place, so we packed our exploring bags and hopped into the car for a 2-hour drive. We arrived and parked by a gate. At this point we pulled out the map and realized it was around a mile-long walk to get to the building. We grabbed our bags and jumped the gate. It was an overgrown road with trees lining it. It was very creepy looking, but nothing we hadn't seen before. We finally approached the buildings and stepped inside the main building. No weird feelings. Just a normal night of exploring so far. We walk around this first building and then head over to the next building. This was where the girls' rooms were. I immediately, upon entering, have a gut-wrenching feeling but don't think much of it. We're about 20 minutes into this building when I feel someone yank my hair. I turn around thinking it's one of my friends messing with me, but all of my friends were in a room in front of me. I run to them and decide that I'm not going to stand alone anymore. I hold the hands of 2 of my friends as I start feeling like I'm being suffocated. I used my inhaler and kept walking along. We left this building and headed to the church on the school property. While standing in the church, I saw a dark figure beside my friend as she said, "I feel like someone is next to me." I didn't mention what I'd seen because I wasn't trying to freak anyone out. She then said, "If there's anything here, grab my hand," and she felt something yank her hand. She got very freaked out and alerted us that she thought we needed to leave, so we started walking out. Another one of our friends is now blankly staring ahead. We ask him to stop messing around and that this isn't funny and he's scaring people. He then starts mumbling about ending self, which soon progresses into screaming, "I need to save them. They need me to help them, and I need to get them out," and starts running back in the direction of the building. My other 2 friends grab him, and he's pushing and fighting and screaming the same thing over and over. They had to tackle him to the ground to make him stop, and finally he stops and gets back up and keeps walking in the right direction. At this point we are all quite horrified and fast walking toward the car. The friend starts mumbling again and tries running back again. The other 2 friends grab him and pretty much drag/pull him back to the car. We get into the car, and he passes out. We're all talking about what had happened on the way home, and when he wakes up, we ask him if he was messing with us. He said no and had absolutely no memory of what had happened or where he was. Months later, he still did not remember anything that happened that night or even going at all. This event definitely scared us out of exploring again for quite some time. That night still haunts me and makes me feel nauseous when I think about it. When I was 8, female, and my brother was 9, we moved with my mom to a tiny town after my parents split up. The new house was 2 stories with 3 bedrooms and a den. There was a large bedroom on the main floor with a full bathroom and a small den at the front of the house. The master was upstairs along with another room that was entirely purple, paint, carpet, drapes, so my brother immediately claimed the big room on the main floor with the bathroom, and I was stuck in the purple nightmare. When we were moving in, we noticed a lock on the door to my brother's room, but it was odd because it locked from the outside with a key. We eventually found the key in the cellar. My mom just brushed it off. The room also only had 1 window, close to the ceiling, that was long but not wide and didn't open. So it let in light. But you couldn't really see out unless you stood on something. The other 2 bedrooms both had regular locks on the doors that locked from the inside. There was an attic at the top of the stairs that also had a lock on the outside, so we didn't think too much of it. We all went to bed that first night, and I don't remember anything too off about myself. Just new house strangeness. My brother the next morning said the light in his bathroom was flickering, water was running, and the toilet was flushing, and he was a bit freaked out. My mom checked the room, and everything seemed fine in daylight. He decided to stick it out. We explored the house that day, found the key to the door, and found odd leftovers from previous people in the cellar and attic. The attic was right beside my room, and I was a bit spooked by it, but I'm sure that was just me being 8. The next night after we all went to bed, I woke up to my brother screaming at the top of his voice, "Mom! Help me! Please stop! Help!" from downstairs. I got there first because my room was closest, but my mom was right behind me. He was in his bed thrashing and looked like he was basically having a fit. When I got closer to his bed, he literally jumped out of it crying and staring at his bed. He said he felt something on his chest holding him down and what felt like thumbs being pressed into his eyes and a voice whispering "Die out, die out, die out" in his ear. We couldn't see anything in the room, but my brother was adamant that he was not going to stay in there. My mom was trying to cheer him up and said he could sleep in her room. My brother and I were halfway up the stairs, which were across from the room, and he asked her to please shut the door. I have never seen him so spooked. She laughed and said okay and went back to close the door and even made a joke about being able to lock the door now and did just that. As she started up the stairs toward us, we heard a loud knock on the door coming from the inside. Without a doubt, my brother and I screamed in terror and sprinted towards my mom's bedroom, trailed closely by her. He moved into the small den the next day. He just couldn't sleep in there, so we turned it into a rec room and had our couch and TV in there instead. He had no issues in there. We never slept in that room, but anyone who came to stay with us said they would be woken by activity in the bathroom or catch glimpses of something, but no one ever felt what my brother did, thankfully. We only lived there for about 1.5 years. It's been 30 years now, and I have always wondered who or what was kept locked in that room and why. My demonic encounters. I just started listening to this channel while at work inside of trailers. It reminded me of my own paranormal encounters, as some people would say. Let me preface this with I am a Christian, so I believe paranormal encounters to be demons or demonic encounters. That being said, let's go back to the time I believe the phenomenon started. I was 8 years old when my grandpa passed away. The event was back in 2010, I'm 23 now. My grandpa was a constant presence in our lives, but he suffered from COPD due to years of smoking, and we only visited him during the 2-hour drive to his house for occasions like Christmas and Thanksgiving. When he died, I was at his house, and it was a really hard thing for me to go through. Even now I struggle with death, and me being 8 years old, his death hit me really, really hard. Sometime before my grandpa passed away, my dad had watched 13 Ghosts on the Sci-Fi Channel. This movie kind of freaked me out. I mean, only being able to see scary ghosts with special glasses on? How could that not scare an 8-year-old little boy? This comes into how my parents react, which is why it's an important detail. Having gone to my grandpa's funeral and him being buried, everything started to get better. Even as a little boy, eventually you get used to your loved one being gone. That was until I started seeing things. Not even just things, but a person. It was a tall man. He looked somewhat like my grandpa, but it wasn't him. He was tall and lanky like my grandfather was, but he wore an old duster and a wide-brimmed hat. I saw him one night in my closet and started crying. My mom chalked it up to me having watched 13 Ghosts and got mad at my dad for letting me watch it. That was the first instance of seeing this man. Another was when I was walking to soccer practice down the street, and I saw this same figure/man standing out in a field watching me. I saw this man several times over the period of about a month or so and then never saw him again. Fast forward several years, I'm in late middle school, I'm probably about 13 in my 8th grade year, and my little sister is 5 years younger than me. This would have put her at 8. There was a night I was having trouble sleeping, so I decided to get up out of my bed and grab a glass of water. So I made my way to the living room, and when I entered, I noticed my sister sitting on the arm of the couch facing the corner. I'll use the name Mary. "Mary, are you okay? What are you doing up?" I asked. She didn't respond. So I walked up to her and put my hand on her shoulder. The moment I touched her, without looking back at me, my little sister responded in a way that scared the ever-living crap out of me. She growled and said, "Leave us alone." This wasn't normal behavior for her at all, and the fact she said us made the hairs on the back of my neck stand straight up. I walked backwards watching her on my way to my parents' room. I told my dad what happened, and he just kind of shrugged it off. He walked out to the living room, wrangled my sister up off the couch, carried her to her room, and put her back in bed. We talked about this instance a little bit, and even now it gets brought up, and it still creeps me out. But no one really gives thought to it. Fast forward several years after that, this was probably about 2022. I woke up one morning in the spring, and my dad and little sister both looked like complete garbage. They were sitting at the dining room table with my mom, and they were talking. I sat down and asked what was wrong. My dad was talking and visibly looked like he got no amount of sleep last night. He began to tell us that he suffered from sleep paralysis for the first time in his life. He said he had woken up lying flat on his back, He could only move his eyes. Looming above him when he opened his eyes was a dark, shadowy apparition. It was a man. Tall. Lanky. With a wide-brimmed hat. My dad tried to scream and could only manage to get out muffled moans without his mouth actually opening. This eventually woke up my mom. My mom was able to calm him down, and eventually he was able to move again. My sister spoke up at this point when my dad finished talking and asked him what time this happened. He told her it was about 2:30 a.m., which is what time it was when he checked after he could move. Her face went blank. My parents asked her what was wrong. She had the exact same thing happen to her that same night at 3 a.m. The same apparition. Same size. Same hat. I had trouble sleeping for weeks after this, worried that I too would be held still and just watched. After thinking about this in a trailer at work tonight, I didn't realize how all three of these encounters could very well be tied together. Beginning when I was a young boy, even when I was an adult. Having put some thought into these encounters, I 100% believe that my family has had some sort of demonic oppression that has flared up throughout the years. I was able to physically see him. He influenced and/or possessed my sister as a child at one point and then caused sleep paralysis on her and my father in the same night. I hope no one ever has to encounter anything like this in their life. This is a true accounting of events that occurred between November 2012 and January 2013. This document is not a contrived or exaggerated recounting. I want to preface that I am a recovering addict and had been clean for 2 years and 3 months when the occurrences began. Because I choose to maintain my anonymity as a recovering addict, in keeping with the traditions and principles of my program, I do not use my real name, nor do I use the actual names of anyone included in this recounting. I am a college graduate and a career professional, but I will not disclose specifics in these areas either. I will use actual geographical locations but will not disclose the address of the location where this story takes place. I am a very spiritual person. And it is my faith that saved my life. My faith and my mom, my recovery family. I was 43 years old when the events occurred. In November 2012, after a painful breakup with my partner of 10 years, I, along with my 7-year-old black Labrador retriever, Sora, moved out of the 2,500 square foot house that I owned with my former partner, because we had put it on the market, and into one side of a duplex that was just east of downtown Orlando. The ranch style, red brick, 2-bedroom unit was perfect. I recall feeling a sense of accomplishment in finding a place so close to downtown. The rental rate was surprisingly affordable, given the unit's location and spaciousness. I was less than a mile from the heart of downtown on the outskirts of the highly desirable Eola Heights. The Orlando Horticulture Society maintained a beautiful city park less than half a block away. This location was ideal for my morning and evening walks with Sora. Plus, the duplex had a fenced backyard that was perfect for those times when it was easier to just open the back door and let my precious pup out to do her business. The duplex was built in the late 1940s. The place had never been renovated and still had the original terrazzo floors, bathroom tiles, wood-stained kitchen cabinets, etc. But it had been very well maintained, and, while outdated, it had a classic charm about it. The day that I signed the lease, Mike, the guy from the property management company, informed me that they would not be leasing out the other side of the duplex anytime soon. He didn't offer an explanation, and frankly I was so thrilled over the fact that I would have privacy and wouldn't have to deal with anyone else on the property that I didn't ask why. I thought that if I didn't scoop the poop, no one would complain. If I had company, there would be no nosy neighbor minding my business. I could play my music as loud as I wished. If Sora barked, there would be no complaints. It represented freedom, privacy, and a sense of pride in that I had found such a great place that was so affordable in a great location. Finding a place helped somewhat ease the pain of the breakup and gave me a sense of independence. It was the first time in my life that I would live alone. Without another human, that is. I loved Sora, she was my best friend and a great companion. And she enjoyed the fact that I started to let her jump up into my bed and sleep next to me at night, and she loved the walks in the nearby park. I found myself in close proximity to the downtown area, situated on a relatively bustling road. There was a fair amount of foot traffic. Not a lot of foot traffic at night, but enough so that the sound of people conversing as they walked by never struck me as odd. I simply accepted it as part of living close to downtown. I kept my curtains closed all the time because I was close enough to the sidewalk that nosy passersby could see inside my house. A couple of weeks after I had moved in, it occurred to me that every night, at around 11 p.m., I would hear what seemed to be the same voices engaged in the same indiscernible conversation. After a week, my curiosity compelled me to identify these habitual speakers, so I positioned myself near the front door at 11 p.m. Like clockwork at 11 p.m. on the dot, The same voices having the same muffled conversation could be heard starting at one end of the sidewalk in front of my duplex and walking towards downtown. When I heard them talking, I started to open my front door, but as soon as I started to turn the doorknob, the conversation abruptly stopped. I opened the door and stepped out onto the front porch. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely terrified. It just didn't make sense. There were no people at all. There were no people on either the sidewalk or the street. It was just silent. I didn't even hear the cars driving on the busy stretch of East Colonial Drive just a few blocks away. That night marked the beginning of strange occurrences. It started with my precious dog. The sight of Sora retreating to the corner of the living room, farthest from the front door, her whole body trembling, is burnt into my memory. I had to pick her up and carry her to the bedroom that night. That was also the night that the 11 p.m. voices stopped. But that's also the night when the really frightening things started up. What happened next convinced me that I was having genuine paranormal experiences. I decided to start keeping a journal of my experiences. They began to occur at all hours of the day and night. This is the order that the first occurrences happened. Saturday morning, November 10, 2012. Between 10:05 and 10:10 a.m. Vacuuming my living room rug, the vacuum cleaner cut off, then I heard the voice of an elderly sounding man, as if only a couple of feet away from me, say, "What are you doing?" Then the vacuum cut back on. I ran out of the house, calling Sora to follow me. I wouldn't go back into the house until my NA sponsor came over 3 hours later. Tuesday morning, November 13, 2012, approximately 1:20 a.m. Awakened by the sound of something crashing onto the floor in the kitchen. It sounded like a stack of plates. I got up to see what was wrong and found that all the lights were on except my bedroom light. Wednesday morning, November 14, 2012, approximately 1:30 a.m. I had recorded myself turning off all the lights throughout the house before going to bed. The sound of a stack of plates crashing to the floor woke me up again. The lights in the living room and kitchen were on. I got up and turned them off. As I climbed into bed, both the kitchen and living room lights came on again. I continued to document the strange occurrences, but would just write down the dates, times, then say, same as last night. Unless there was a change. One night, the lights in the living room flickered on and off for approximately 10 minutes. By this time, I had gotten over my trepidation about sharing these experiences with people I knew. I started to tell close friends about what I was experiencing, and much to my relief, the overwhelming response was loving and supportive. A friend of mine from my recovery program suggested that I have the duplex blessed and introduced me to an ordained minister from a nearby Unitarian church. I gratefully accepted my friend's offer to appeal to the minister to perform the blessing. And on Saturday, December 9, 2012, 2 ministers and 3 of my friends from the program came over and prayed and performed a blessing, then a sort of spiritual cleansing with sage. The ritual and prayers seemed to work. All unusual activities stopped. I had a wonderful Christmas in my new digs and felt a tremendous sense of relief. Sora seemed to be returning to her normal playful self. It really seemed that everything was going to be alright. Until the night of January 10, 2013. I have gone over it again and again, trying to figure out what it was that caused the whole experience to start again. It was as if I was watching a movie again. Complete with the 11 p.m. phantom pedestrians. That night, starting at 11:15 p.m., I called everyone who had been part of the blessing and cleansing. They all, in turn, agreed to come back the next weekend. The next day I called the property management company and spoke to the property manager and the person that had done the lease signing with me. I asked him how long the unit I had rented had been vacant before I moved in, why the other unit being leased, and if previous tenants had ever said anything about strange things happening in the unit. He only answered my first question before saying he had an important call and would get back to me. It was around this date that I started to get sick. The sickness wasn't just a common cold or stomachache, but a severe and excruciating illness. I developed, almost overnight, ulcerative colitis. Even though I didn't have Crohn's disease. It was debilitating. It affected every aspect of my life. Then the infections came. This went on for weeks and caused me to have to take an extended medical leave of absence because I was put on 4 antibiotics. I was never one to get sick. I worked out daily, ate healthy, and got plenty of rest, at least prior to moving into this duplex. Overall, I was a very active, very healthy person. This was particularly true now that I had begun my road to recovery. My doctor was perplexed as to why my health had taken so drastic a turn. Then it happened. I was physically attacked. It was January 28th. I was pushed while stepping out of the tub. I fell to the floor. I've never been so scared. I started praying the Lord's Prayer and the 23rd Psalm intermittently, over and over. Balled up in a fetal position. I was terrified and had reached my breaking point. Almost as if on cue, my dear friend Rico called me. I got to my cell phone. I was crying. The only thing I heard from Rico was, "Here's the deal, I am coming to see you right now, and if you have plans, cancel them, this is urgent. I'll be there in 2 hours. I'll explain when I get there, and, are you okay, by the way?" Rico lived in Tampa. I hadn't seen or spoken to him since the weekend that I moved into the duplex. Rico had a habit of visiting his psychic every week. He would frequently include comments like, "Well, Laura, his psychic, said I must do TS, or Laura told me not to do insert activity here. Or oh my god, she said this would happen." I adored Rico. I think that, had I not been in a relationship when I first met him, I definitely would have pursued him. Whenever we were around each other, it was a wonderful time. I dressed quickly and grabbed Sola's leash. I drove to a nearby dog park and waited for Rico to call. I was not going back into that house alone. Rico called 2 hours later to tell me he'd arrived. He used my hidden spare key to get into my unit. When I got back to the house, I walked in through the back door and called to Rico, who responded, "Do not close the back door." The smell of sage filled my whole house. I walked into the hallway, and there was Rico and some woman that I had never seen before. Rico was waving his hands over a smoking roll of sage. He walked up to me, staring me in the eyes. "Paul, this is Laura." Laura walked over and threw her arms around me. Then she leaned down and, looking at Sora, said, "Why yes, girl, we are here to help," as if she was responding to a direct question from Sora. Rico went on to tell me that when he arrived at Laura's house that morning, the only thing she said was for him to go to his friend Paul and that she was coming along. She told Rico that Paul was in danger and they had to sage Paul's house. Not just once, but a few times, and to get a priest to bless the house. Rico then told me, "Paul the first never spoken your name to her before, she always asks that I never give names so that her visions can be validated. When she said your name, I was already walking towards the door. What you are going through isn't a haunting, Paul, there is an evil here that will not stop inflicting harm until it's banished or destroyed. This is going to take so much more than I can do." Laura explained, then just as she finished speaking, I started feeling extremely nauseated. Sora ran out the back door to the far end of the backyard and started trembling. Then, right in front of me, Rico and Laura, in broad daylight, 2 of the kitchen cabinets opened and the contents started falling out of the cabinets. I looked at both Rico and Laura, both were terrified. Laura started praying, "Heavenly Father, send your angels, please protect us." Then I heard that same disembodied voice the day that my vacuum cleaner turned off and on. This time Rico and Laura heard it too. It said the same thing, "What are you doing?" Another cabinet door swung open and then slammed shut. The voice spoke again. But it was different. You know how Hollywood always portrays the voice when someone is possessed? They kind of got it right. It was like that. It was the voice of evil, malevolent, it screamed. "What are you doing?" I stood there trembling, looking at the cabinets, weak and nauseated. I don't recall if it was Laura or Rico that grabbed my hand, and in all candor, until I started writing about the experience, I hadn't thought about that moment, only that I was pulled in the direction of the back door and out into the backyard and that I was feeling more nauseated and I was hyperventilating. I don't recall passing out either. I only recall waking up in the hospital. I woke up and immediately realized that I was in a hospital bed. I felt the sphygmomanometer cuff on my right arm and the 4th needle inserted and taped to the top of my left hand. I tried to call out for Sora, but my throat was dry and nothing came out. My mom was sitting in a chair next to the hospital bed. She stood up and grabbed the call remote. Then walked quickly to the hospital room door and called out, "He's waking up. Come quick. Please." It's blurry and difficult to remember exactly what happened after that, apart from nurses coming in and asking me if I knew where I was and if I knew my name. But once I had been assessed and was given a cup of ice water, the nurses left the room to find out if I could be cleared for dietary. My head started to clear. The reason I passed out and was now lying in a hospital bed was that the infection had gotten worse, and I was dehydrated and malnourished. In the days just prior to the attack, I hadn't eaten or drunk anything or administered the 4th antibiotics. Oh yeah, I forgot to include the part where I had to have a PICC line inserted and had ripped it out the first night that I was in the hospital. I had a prescription for 4 antibiotics, the kind that are in a ball and push the fluids into the PICC line. I had to keep them refrigerated and was supposed to be self-administering 3 times a day. I digress. I had been consumed by what I was going through, and my life had started falling apart. I was circling the drain at a rate 10 times faster than when I had been in active addiction. Mom took my hand and told me that she had already visited me twice and had picked up Sora and taken her home, to Mom's house. Once Mom was sure that I was coherent, she squeezed my hand and pressed her other hand against my cheek. She stared into my eyes. I could see tears in hers. Then she told me that I was never to go back into that house. I remember feeling such a tremendous sense of relief and crying, no. Bawling. My mom hugged me and then sat with me until I fell asleep. I received my discharge from the hospital a few days later. Mom picked me up. I really wasn't paying attention to where we were until we turned onto the street where the duplex was. I thought. I started to speak, but then, as we pulled up to the duplex, I saw my two brothers in their pickup trucks, several people from my program, and a U-Haul. I am not exaggerating when I say that it took less than 30 minutes for everything that I had in that house to be removed and loaded onto the trucks. We caravanned to the house I owned with my former partner, who was waiting at the house when we all pulled up. He had picked up my Jeep and parked it in the garage. Tim, my ex, met me at the car door. As I stepped out of the car, he hugged me. This doesn't mean we are getting back together. But I do love you, and you gave everybody a real scare. This is where you belong, for now. I laughed. Thinking to myself, you have no idea what a real scare is. Within a week, my health had started to return. The ulcerative colitis disappeared, along with the infections. I forgot to mention that Sola had started losing her fur. Within 3 weeks her fur had grown back, and she was vibrant and healthy. I called the property management company and advised them that I had vacated the duplex, and I demanded my deposit back. I advised them that I had enough witnesses to attest to everything that happened to me. I got the previous tenants' names and contact info, and they told me about their experience. They had experienced the exact same things as I had. They had also done a bit of research. The property had a dark past that spanned decades. 3 suicides, a home invasion that resulted in 2 murders in the unit that wasn't rented. I was able to find a newspaper article about the home invasion. The property management company mailed my deposit and refunded me for 2 months' rent. The failure to disclose the property's past was unethical, and it is now illegal in most states. In the years since, I avoided going anywhere near that property. If I were driving, I would detour around that stretch of road. The most important thing for me personally is that through the entire months-long episode, I stayed clean. My spiritual condition was solid. The duplex was raised in 2019. One day, I was home alone because my parents had to go out of town for a few hours and didn't want me to miss school. I was living in a seriously haunted house at the time and did not like being inside, so I was outside shooting some hoops right after the bus dropped me off. It was an overcast day, and I was expecting the rain, so as soon as it started sprinkling, I went inside to watch cartoons. Well, as soon as I opened the door, I noticed that the lights are out everywhere except my room, so I leave the door open for the light. I started to walk towards the breaker in my parents' room when I noticed that the light was flickering. I approach the door, and as I am opening it, I see a lady dressed in white sitting cross-legged that is floating and staring at the flickering light. Well, she starts lowering her head towards me, and I'm completely frozen. The feeling of terror is there, and then she begins to reach for me when I finally snap out of it. As I turned, I heard the door swing open and steps chasing me out as I ran out the open door outside. This is the worst experience I have ever had living for 9 years in that house, and it left me traumatized to the point that I did not want to be home alone anymore. I ran down the block to my aunt's house and told her what happened. My cousin and I spent the entire afternoon discussing the incident until my parents returned home, at which point I informed them. I am 18 now, and this occurred mostly at the age of 17. I live in a small house with a step-sibling, a cousin, and my mother, plus 3 dogs and assorted pets. I've always been a scaredy cat and have experienced small things that left me shaken as a child. This house always felt odd, and the first night I was home alone, my dogs barked at the ceiling, plus there's always been an odd feeling in the hallway. Also potentially relevant, I always had to sleep with my door open because I'd get terrible sleep paralysis/dreams and would need to know someone was close by. At that time, I was experiencing intense depression but was not taking any medications that could cause hallucinations. Halfway through last year, about when I turned 17, I was moved into the largest room so I had a place to study. Said room has always had furniture but has been relatively vacant. Out of the few years we've been here, it's only been slept in a number of times. Instantly things started feeling weird. I had to sleep with my door closed because I couldn't sleep if I could see out into the hall, and it always felt like a presence was watching me. Then my earrings used to go missing and show up in the same spot again. The door opened, but no one was in the hall when I went over. It closed too. Then it was chargers, clothes, anything. The door would open and close right next to me. At first I assumed it was my stepbrother. The things going missing and reappearing made me feel like I was going crazy. I couldn't sleep well at night, and when I did, I'd have dreams where I couldn't tell if I was awake or asleep as I was looking at my room from my bed. I think sleep paralysis, which I've experienced before. I'd feel someone lying behind me, and even though it wasn't a malicious act, I'd feel so terrified, like I was going to die. Mum made fun of me whenever I'd mention it, and I thought I was genuinely imagining everything and was in a bad mindset, so I joked a lot about it and nicknamed it my demon to try and negate the fear, and would often ask for my things back when they went missing, and it would work. Ask for my door closed, and that would work too. Whenever my friend would stay over, we'd always hear noises in the hall/kitchen. It got real when her friend came over one afternoon while they were going somewhere, and the girl was very uncomfortable, moving from the bed to the chair to my desk. She simply didn't appreciate my presence. When they left, it took maybe 10 minutes before my friend rang me, quite shaken, saying her friend was extremely distraught. Apparently the entire time she'd felt someone pressing down on her shoulders and this overwhelming presence that seemed to linger around me, which was why she stuck away from me. Said it really scared her. She had no idea I'd been experiencing things. I was terrified and finally realized maybe I wasn't crazy, but my family wouldn't listen. Things kept happening and progressively got worse. Whenever my friend would stay, it'd be terrible. We'd hear scratching and banging and footsteps. I had to escort her to the bathroom because one night she went to push open the door, and something shoved it closed on her. One night she left my door open and walked to the bathroom across from my room. I saw my handle twist and the door close, then heard footsteps to the lounge room. I thought it was her and went out just as she came out of the bathroom. We didn't sleep all night as we were home alone. Flash forward a few months, I started a course and made a friend, and only a few weeks after we met, as we walked to the station together, she asked if I'd ever been told I had a strong presence attached to me. For reference, I'd never told her anything. She said it made her feel quite uncomfortable, and while she didn't think it was malicious towards me per se, it was very possessive and didn't like me interacting with anyone. I freaked out, obviously. Things kept getting worse. My family believed me. I tried to burn white sage, and it blew back in my face. I kept having those dreams, and in my mind, whenever I thought about it, I saw a large black figure with disproportionately long limbs, very thin and tall. Maybe that was just my mind putting a face to it. The feeling of being watched seemed to follow me everywhere, and I was a mess. Then one day a few months ago I had a breakdown and ripped my room apart, got rid of a lot of stuff, and decided that I couldn't live like this anymore. Stopped talking to myself, whenever stuff happened, stopped acknowledging it, and got some heavy-duty sleeping tablets to make sure it couldn't harass me at night. These days stuff rarely happens, and never like it did. White hooded figure eerie, true story. When I was about 14 years old, I saw something in my room that I still can't believe to this day. I'm 24 now, but I still think about this night quite a bit. It was around 3 a.m., and I suddenly woke up. Nothing felt wrong or abnormal. However, when I looked towards the entrance of my room, I saw a figure around 7 feet tall as my doorframe, just standing there. It was wearing a white robe with its hood over its head. It looked something like an Assassin's Creed character. I was so damn scared the first thing I did was throw my covers over my head, and I froze up. My heart pounded as I contemplated my next move. At that moment I told myself, this is just a dream. After what felt like a couple of minutes of just sitting under my covers, I knew that I was definitely awake and very lucid. So I decided to take the covers quickly off my head and see if it was still standing there. When I turned towards the doorway and saw the figure still standing there, I nearly lost my breath. I knew at this point this was no dream. I'm really seeing this. I threw the covers back over my head and devised a plan to sprint out of my room and into my mother's room. I counted in my head 1, 2, 3 and threw the covers off me and ran so fast into my mother's room, waking her up. The figure had disappeared. I slept in her room that night because I was so terrified of that thing coming back. The house I'm living in isn't haunted and has no past owners. My family owns the land it is on and built the house themselves. Has anybody had an experience like this? Ghost Cat protected us from malevolent entities. Before I begin, I want to reassure you that this is 100% true. I'm a student at a high-performing university in the south of England, an area littered with history. Last night, my boyfriend and I decided to visit the local pub and then see where the night took us. At around 12:30 a.m., we'd had a few pints and decided to go ghost hunting. There's a castle in this town, which is thought to have been built shortly after the year 1066, so that's the area we first visited. We're both in tune with spirits and often feel physical effects when spirits are around. We can also tell the difference between benevolent spirits and malevolent entities. At one point, while looking down a very dark alleyway between two Tudor-era buildings, we felt it, a horrible presence, which felt heavy on both our minds and bodies. Shivers ran up and down my spine, chills shot through my veins, and my mind screamed at me to leave. At this point, I prayed for a spirit of protection to watch over us. I later did this again when we got further up the hill, as I felt as if the evil spirit from the alleyway was still following us, as did my boyfriend. Now, there's a little network of roads with really old houses on it at the edge of town, which is at the top of the hill. These houses are mostly Georgian, Edwardian, and Victorian. Some houses felt really, really bad, and some felt fine, but there was one in particular that really felt like it was telling me a story. The tallest house seemed to say, "A maid jumped from this window." My boyfriend also sensed something unsettling about this same window, as if there was something very wrong with it. We then proceeded to walk down the road at the top of the hill, feeling watched, when all of a sudden, I noticed a white cat crossing the road, straight towards us. It seemed strange, like there were human eyes behind the cats, but it wasn't creepy at all. It didn't seem interested in being petted but showed all the other signs of trust that cats often display with people they know. It was around this time that we both felt completely sober, despite being drunk before we saw this cat. Here's where it gets really, really strange. The cat began to lead us along the pavements, positioning itself both alongside and ahead of us simultaneously. It was unafraid of my boyfriend and me, but when a group walked by, it hid in the shadows until they left. This cat sat at the end of certain side roads, staring at us, as if telling us not to go down those, and yet let us down others, getting spooked at the same houses as my boyfriend and I, at exactly the same time as us, too. At one point, it reached a zebra crossing, sat down on the pavement, looked both ways, and led us calmly across the road. It crossed the road like a person. The cat continued to lead us along the street again, and as we reached the edge of the town center, it left us, slinking away into a dark garden, but not before it sat, calmly and with its strangely human eyes, to make sure that we got back safely. From the moment we first saw the cat, my boyfriend and I have felt completely calm, protected, guided, and joyful. Before we saw the cat, we were scared, shivering, and wary. In town, we boarded the night bus back to our flat at exactly 2 a.m. I study English literature and am a giant fan of the poet Allen Ginsberg, who I admire for his spirituality, open-mindedness, and, of course, writing ability. It was at this point that the line from his poem A Supermarket in California entered my head, completely without warning and completely unrelated to the night's events. The line was "The doors close in an hour." 3 a.m. is normally the time for heightened paranormal activity, and my boyfriend and I both feel like this cat was telling us to be home by 3 a.m. Perhaps something bad was supposed to happen to us at 3 a.m., and this cat/spirit was protecting us from it? While we were on the bus, sitting calmly, my boyfriend said, maybe the maid jumped from that window and her spirit became a cat, so she'd never get hurt from jumping again. That idea seemed to resonate with me. While the cat itself seemed like a young male, something about it was much older, and it gave off seemingly maternal energy. Perhaps the spirit that was guiding this cat was a mother and so felt drawn to two drunk students who needed protecting from negative energies? What's even weirder is that my boyfriend is estranged from his mother. Maybe the cat/spirit knew this and so wanted to comfort him? Despite feeling spiritual energies, my boyfriend is a scientist by nature and so often found it difficult to believe in stuff like this. Until today. Both of us love cats and are interested in their behaviors and mannerisms. Nothing that this cat did today was normal for any animal, let alone the aloof house cat. After we got home, I did some quick research on cats as spirit guides. They represent curiosity, independence, a spirit of adventure, courage, a deep and relaxed connection with the self, and the exploration of the unknown or the unconscious. Black cats are, unfortunately for them, linked to dark magic, but this cat was white and seemed completely calm and benevolent. There's not much else I can say here, except that I'm still in awe of the events of last night. Truly, something otherworldly happened to us. This is a long one, but it is the scariest paranormal experience I have ever had. In 2019, I and my now husband were enjoying a cold beer in our rented flat one night. We were daydreaming about the future and scrolling through Rightmove, looking at properties out of our price range and wondering what it would be like to own one. We often sent each other properties we knew we couldn't afford. I would often make the comment, "That's it, that's the one," and my husband would respond with, "Ah yes, I'll take 2 for that price." Well, this night was like no other. We scoured the web for properties all across the UK, with no intention of actually pursuing this dream due to our current financial circumstances. "You are going to love this one," my husband said. "It is right up your street, cozy cottage, rural, log burner. Say no more. Send it to me, I said. The moment I heard the words cozy cottage, I was already in love. Ping, he sent across the link, and I excitedly started scrolling through the listing. That's the one, I said, but this time it was different, this time it really was the one. My heart started racing as I read deeper into the property specifics. It was everything I had ever dreamed of, and my husband knew it too. Just one slight problem, the price. We can't afford this house, and even if we could save the money, it would sell before we could buy it. We have to go see it, Leo. We can't, darling, we can't afford to buy right now, and besides, it's 2 hours away from here. Would you even want to move that far? Of course I would. For that house, I would move to the other side of the country. It's perfect. I was hooked and knew that I needed to at least view this property. I experienced a feeling I had never felt before. We had never considered actually viewing any of the previous properties that we had fallen in love with. Sorry, love, one day we will have our dream home, Leo said, but I knew that I had to have that house. The next morning I got up for work and noticed my husband was already in his home office. Early start? I asked him about the early start as I walked into his office, where I noticed the house listing open on his computer screen. I can't stop thinking about that house, he said. I'm going to call the estate agents today and maybe book a viewing. Don't get your hopes up, though, I just don't see how we can afford it, but there's no harm in looking, right? I was like a kid in a toy shop. I was so excited to actually view a property, and the fact that it was my dream home meant my hopes couldn't be any higher. Leo spoke with the estate agents and booked a viewing for the following Saturday. I had to wait 5 days to view the house. I was sure we'd get a call saying the house was sold or that they were no longer taking viewings, but Saturday came, and it was finally time to make the 2-hour trip. The car ride felt like a lifetime. We spoke about our future, the house, and finances. We both knew we wouldn't be able to afford to do this, but we jumped in with rose-tinted glasses anyway. There it is. I pointed at the for sale sign propped up outside the cottage. It looked exactly like the photos. The current owners greeted us at the door and quickly showed us in. There are not many times in life when I find myself speechless, but this is one of them. The cottage was surreal, and the location was perfect. I looked at my husband, and his face said it all. He too was in love. The homeowners seemed lovely. They explained they were in a hurry to sell and were sad to be leaving after only spending 1 year in the property. 1 year? I thought to myself, I would spend the rest of my life here. But little did I know what was to come. Back in the car, my husband and I were silent. We knew it was impossible and told ourselves not to get our hopes up before coming here, but now that we had seen the house, we both knew that it really was the one. That night we sat and went through all of our expenses, canceling all of our unnecessary subscriptions, desperately trying to find an inch of possibility to scrape together the deposit needed, but no matter how hard we tried, we would fall at least £10,000 short of what we needed. Disheartened and exhausted, we both agreed it wasn't possible, and we would just have to forget we had ever seen the house. We emailed the estate agents, thanked them for their time, and asked them to keep us in the loop on the sale of the cottage. The following day was as normal as our Sundays were. We met family, went shopping, and continued as if nothing had happened. That was, of course, until Leo had an unexpected business call to take. Really? You're going to answer that? It's a Sunday, can it wait until you're back at work? I asked. I won't be long, I'm not sure who it is, but it could be urgent. He left the room to answer the call. Roughly 5 minutes later he walked back in the room, only it looked like he had seen a ghost. What's wrong? I shouted, hurrying over to him. You're never going to believe it, someone has just offered me a job on the side, cash in hand sort of thing. That's wonderful. Do you think you can do it? You're quite busy as it is. I asked the question, but I knew he would say yes, he is a workaholic. You don't understand, Chloe, this isn't a small job. They've offered me £10,000 to do this for them. Are you serious? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like someone above had sent an angel. All I could think about was the house. I accepted it straight away. I need to start working on it tonight, they need it desperately. That's fantastic, love. £10,000, that's exactly enough for the house deposit, he finished my sentence off. We were both slightly weirded out by the coincidence, but we have always lived by the motto, if it's meant to be, it will be. The following morning we rang the estate agents first thing and placed our offer on the house. By the afternoon we had been accepted and had already received all of the legal documents to fill in. Overwhelmed, we worked tirelessly for the next 4 months, putting in extra hours and my husband taking on side jobs during evenings and weekends to ensure we had the best start in our new home. Move-in day came around, and the whole process was so smooth sailing. I believed that everything had been destined for us. It took us some time to adjust to our new home, getting our bearings in a new town, coming to terms that we were homeowners, and making sure every last ornament was placed perfectly. We both often joked that the house felt like it was drawing us in, almost like it had a personality. Maybe this was because the property was nearly 200 years old and had a lot of character. But after a while I did start to get a slightly uneasy feeling. All of the coincidences and the fact that we were actually in the property did make me start to question, how is this actually possible? Now, before I continue deeper into this story, I want to pause here to tell you that my husband is the biggest skeptic I have ever met. We couldn't be more opposite when it comes to the paranormal and supernatural. In some ways this is a good thing because he would rationalize some of the things I experienced, putting my mind at ease. On the other hand, I would often find it very frustrating when he wouldn't believe the things I was explaining to him. Back to the story, we had now been living in the cottage for a few months. For the most part, we had settled in nicely. There were just a few things that had started out of the ordinary. Items would randomly disappear and reappear in a completely different place. Keys placed on the side in the kitchen would go missing for days and show up in the bedside cabinet. TV remotes would randomly appear on the kitchen side after we both had sworn he hadn't moved them. I was getting freaked out by these experiences, but my husband said we were just tired. As frustrating as it was, he was probably right, I thought. We were both working hard during the day and decorating at night. We were likely just misplacing the items ourselves, right? It was a Friday night, we had both been up late watching a movie, and I had drunk one too many cups of tea. We went to bed, and as expected, I was up in the night needing to use the loo. The route to the bathroom from the master bedroom was as follows: come out of the door, to the right was the staircase, turn left, the bathroom was immediately in front of you, and to the left again was a long dark hallway that led to the spare bedroom. The open fireplace in the spare bedroom always forced the door shut, creating a draft down the hallway. As I approached the bathroom door, something told me to look down the hallway towards the spare bedroom. To my surprise, the door to the spare bedroom was open, and to my horror I could make out a dark figure lurking in the corner. I froze in fear, petrified and unable to move. All I could do was watch on as, right before my eyes, the house transformed back in time to the 1800s. There was now an iron cot in the corner of the room where we had placed a wardrobe, and the fire was burning even though it was now out of use. I was so confused but still unable to move due to the pure adrenaline rushing through my body. I watched as the figure emerged out of the corner of the room and walked towards the cot. It was a woman dressed in a white Victorian-style dress. She was crying hysterically, leaning over the cot and looking down at what I could only make out to be a deceased child. My heart racing, I managed to take a step closer to the bathroom door. The floorboards underneath me creaked, and in that moment I felt these eyes burning into the side of my head. She saw me. I screamed and ran back into my bedroom and slammed the door shut. What? What is it? My husband jumped out of bed. I saw a woman in the spare room, but it wasn't the spare room, it was different. It was like it was in a different time zone, and I. You what? He asked, still half asleep. Before I could even answer again, he was walking out of the bedroom door. Wait, I shouted as I ran after him. We both walked out into the hallway. He shut the door to the spare room. There's nothing there. He opened the door and looked around. The room was back to normal. You were probably sleepwalking or something. It's 3 a.m., Chloe, let's go back to sleep. I know what I saw, I said, hurrying back into bed. That night I didn't sleep a wink. I kept thinking about the lady that I saw. Who was she? Why was she crying? And what happened to the baby? Questions I knew I'd probably never get the answers to. The next day we both went about our day. Whenever I tried to mention the whole ordeal to my husband, he would just put it down to me being exhausted. Frustrated, I knew this time that this wasn't the case. I knew what I had seen, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. A whole year had passed since that night. It was now 2020. COVID was on the rise, and lockdowns were on the way. The past year had been pretty uneventful in the house. The odd items were still being misplaced, and sometimes I would see things out of the corner of my eye, but nothing that couldn't be explained. A breeze would move a curtain, or car lights would cast a shadow through the window. One thing is for sure, I hadn't seen that lady again. We were now both working from home, spending 24/7 in the cottage due to COVID. We were both starting to get cabin fever when restrictions finally started to be lifted for the first time. The first thing we did was book a week away in North Wales. Wales had our heart: the open, endless countryside, the beaches, and the quaint cottages. We would always visit once or twice a year and always joke that one day we would live there. During this visit, we walked past an estate agent in a small village and noticed an advertisement for a small cottage that was actually within our price range for the first time. Look at this, love. I pointed through the window at the advertisement. Yes, it's lovely, but my gosh, that needs some work. He wasn't wrong. It was on the brink of being derelict. No heating, holes in the windows. It was definitely a fixer-upper. Fancy a project? I joked. Before we could continue our conversation, an emergency news broadcast flashed on our phones. The country was to go back into lockdown in the next 24 hours. We had to rush back to the holiday house and pack up our belongings to head back home. Back home our spirits were low. We were always sad when we had to leave Wales, but this was different. We were both mourning the country and wanted nothing more than to return. A few weeks had passed, and out of curiosity we began searching Ritzville for houses in North Wales. I wasn't surprised that the derelict cottage was no longer for sale. It was priced just right for a builder or DIYer. We talked at length and decided to put our house up for sale. Maybe it was the lockdowns, maybe it was something else, but our perfect cottage was not so perfect anymore. The inviting feeling we had once felt had disappeared, and the house felt cold. We spoke to a few estate agents and promptly decided who we would list the house with. Within a few days, there was a for sale sign standing outside our home. Now, like I said, the energy had shifted, the house was different, but nothing could have prepared me for what was about to happen. The second that for sale sign went up, it was like we had awoken something evil in the house. That same night we listed the house. Leo and I had been celebrating with a cold beer. Cheers to whatever the future brings, we said. We had a late one and headed off to bed. That night, I experienced a sense of unease, akin to being under observation, but I attributed it to possibly having consumed too much alcohol. Tossing and turning, I struggled to sleep. My husband, on the other hand, was flat out and snoring next to me. I was just about to nod off when something inside me told me to open my eyes. There she was. The woman I had seen over a year ago in the spare room was now standing over our bed. Her Victorian dress and her mousy blonde hair in an outdated updo made an unmistakable outline. She was staring at my husband sleeping. I tightly closed my eyes, hoping that when I reopened them, she would have vanished. I slowly opened my eyes, but she was still there, only now she had her hand out, carefully approaching my husband, heading straight for his throat. I screamed and watched as she contorted her head towards me, grinning as she was still leaning towards my husband, hands stretched out ready to strangle him. I dived under the covers once again, jolting my husband awake. "Are you okay?" he shouted. I was sobbing, inconsolable, unable to find any words to explain to him what had just happened. "Chloe, what's wrong? You're starting to worry me now." He sat up, giving me a cuddle, and calmed me down before I could talk. "I saw her." "Saw who?" he asked, understandably confused. "The woman. The same woman I saw in the spare room last year, but this time she was trying to end you." Usually he would have some witty excuse as to what I had seen, but this time he could tell I was dead serious. I was a wreck. He had never seen me like this before, and somewhere in the back of his mind he could tell that what I was saying was true. I didn't sleep much for the next week, and Leo could see how the house was draining my energy. We pushed on to find a new property as quickly as possible and accepted every house viewing for our cottage. It only took 1 week for us to find a buyer for our house. They put an offer in just above our asking price, and we were ecstatic, accepting their offer right away. As usual that night, we toasted to selling our house. We were standing in the kitchen on FaceTime with family, sharing the good news. "I just need the loo," I said, running upstairs. Leo was still in the kitchen on FaceTime with his mother. I was washing up in the bathroom when I had the uneasy feeling come over me. Once again I felt watched. I felt as though someone or something was standing outside of the bathroom door waiting for me to come out. Shaking off the fear, I slowly opened the bathroom door. Standing in the doorway of our master bedroom was the woman. She was partially blocking my only exit to the top of the staircase. I once again froze as she turned to look at me. Her face twisted and her eyes turned black. She began to hysterically scream in my face, and dark tears ran down her angry expression on her face. She started to move closer to me. I ran like hell up the stairs, closing my eyes and screaming at myself as I ran past her down the stairs and into the kitchen. "She's here. She's at the top of the stairs," I cried as I ran to Leo, his mom still on the other end of the phone. It's okay, you're safe now." Leo once again tried to comfort me, but as before, I was too distraught. We slept in the living room that night and went together on toilet shifts. Whatever or whoever she was, I could tell that she was angry at us. Maybe it was because we were selling the house, I don't know, but something in that house had changed. Over the next few months we were dealing with solicitors and estate agents on a weekly basis. Nothing about this house sale was smooth sailing, and we still couldn't find a house to move to ourselves. Our spirits started to dampen when we lost our first buyer and had to relist the house for sale. We had decided that if we don't sell again in a fortnight and if we haven't found a house ourselves, then we would have to take the house off the market. One evening, we were scrolling through the internet for houses, as always, and I spotted the house that had started all of this. The derelict cottage in North Wales had been relisted, but this time for even cheaper than before. I showed my husband, and we agreed to book a viewing. The following weekend we drove the 3.5 hours out to Wales to see the property. We had never visited this area before and were unaware of its characteristics. For all we knew, the property might be inexpensive due to the location. Nevertheless, we still went. Upon arrival, we noticed just how rural this house was. There were no neighbors, no main roads, and no streetlights. The minuscule cottage stood amidst endless expanses of agricultural land. "Area can't be that bad if there's no one here," Leo joked. "What a view, though." I pointed towards the end of the garden. That view was like something out of a painting. At that moment, I realized that the interior design of the house didn't matter. The view alone was worth millions to me. We looked around the property and quickly realized it needed a lot more work than we were capable of. But for some crazy reason, we both loved the house. We thanked the estate agent for showing us around and asked if there had been much interest. "Yes, we have 5 more viewings today and lots more over the weekend," they replied. We hurried into the car and knew if we wanted it, we would have to move fast. "I don't know what it is about that house, but I feel safe in there," I said to Leo as I was buckling my seatbelt up. "Yes, I know what you mean. What do you think about all the work it needs, though?" he asked. "It's a lot of work, but that view is amazing. It will definitely be worth it just for that." We drove 1 mile up the road, pulled over, and rang the estate agents immediately. Unbeknownst to me, my husband decided to put in a lowball offer, explaining to the estate agents that the property needs a lot of TLC and it wouldn't be possible at the price listed. I thought he was crazy, as the sellers had already listed the property for £40,000 less than they had done the first time around. We waited eagerly for a call back from the estate agent, worried that the sellers would be offended by our offer and wouldn't want to negotiate with us. To my surprise, they accepted the offer. Not only did they accept our offer, they also canceled all of the viewings that were booked to take place for that afternoon too. We raced home, feeling both excited and a little shocked by what we had just done. We were not DIY professionals, and this was a significant move that took us even further away from our friends and family. Upon arriving home, we received a phone call from our estate agents. We received an offer on our house, once again above the asking price. This time it was a first-time buyer who wanted to move quickly, and as the house we had just purchased was empty, the chain was short. We accepted straight away and began to prepare for the paperwork. A few months passed, and we were starting to pack the house up one evening when the doorbell rang. It was my neighbor. We hadn't spoken too much before, but she had been clearing out her loft and came across an old journal. She explained that the journal was written by a lady who once lived in my house many years before and thought that I would like to read through it. I thanked her and took her up on her offer. That night after dinner, I sat at the dining room table and began to flick through the journal. I turned a few pages before suddenly being stopped in my tracks. Right there in front of me was a portrait of the woman I had been seeing in our house. Underneath the painting it read Jane Smith. I continued over the page. June 16, 1856. Today I laid my sweet child to rest. I couldn't read any more. "Leo, get in here," I shouted at him through the living room doors. My husband was equally astounded to discover that the diary my neighbor had given me contained all the information I had previously shared about this woman. I spent the rest of the night delving deeper into her story to find out she married a noble man and went on to be what some might say was famous in the Victorian era. Because of this, she was pretty easy to find on Google, and a few universities in the area had done some studies on her life. I spent hours researching this woman, and I came across something quite eerie. Minus the fame, I and she hadn't lived too much of a dissimilar life. We had the same family setup, both experienced challenging times, and had lived in similar areas. Obviously, we also lived in the same house. All of these, though, were just coincidences. I thought, until I saw a study paper online. It read that after living at our current house, she too moved to North Wales with her husband. But not only did she move to North Wales, she moved to the exact same town that we were buying our new home in. I was officially creeped out. Was this woman following me, or was I following her? Or was I her in a past life, and I'm now reliving this life in a different timeline? Were we related, or is this all a coincidence? A million questions flooded through my mind, and in a panic state I slammed the diary shut and promptly took it back to the neighbor, never wanting to look at it again. After this the house sale went very smoothly. I never saw the woman again. and we moved into the derelict cottage in North Wales. We were busy renovating the new house. We didn't know much about the history of the house and suspected it to be around 300 years old. After conducting some research, I discovered that the house served as a safe haven for Liverpool children during the World Wars. And that is precisely what this house is, a safe house. After living here for 3 years and transforming it into a home, we have consistently felt safe and protected. Although the lack of neighbors and remote location can sometimes be unsettling, the moment we lock our doors, we feel a sense of security and protection. That was until about a fortnight ago, when my husband and I went for a short walk to a cemetery down the road from here. As we admired the ancient headstones, we read out the names of those buried there. And then we saw it. Jane Smith died 1868, followed by the name of our current house. It follows me. Ever since I can remember, I have always had a love for the paranormal. I was raised in a household that believed in spirits, even though we are Christian. My mother even claimed to have precognition. She would get bad feelings and images of things that would happen. She was almost never wrong. I've strayed here a bit, but I wanted to provide some insight. I was never taught to be afraid. I never even thought it was real, to be completely honest. That was until my grandmother died. She wasn't just some old lady that we visited begrudgingly. She was my best friend, a mentor, someone that always understood. You could go to her with the worst thing you had ever done, and you would leave with peace and love in your heart. And of course, since she was a wonderful person, she had cancer. Soft tissue cancer is so rare it took doctors years to diagnose it. It put her through hell. She went the whole 9 yards, chemo, radiation, and experimental medicine. It did nothing to slow the tumors from growing. Finally, she decided to opt for quality over quantity. I lived with her for 2 years and took care of her. It would never amount to all that she did for me, but it was something I could do for this angel of a person. I watched the cancer change her from a high-spirited, sharp-witted woman to a bedridden shell of a person. She was in so much pain, she was losing her mind. Dementia ran in her family, and she was showing the signs. Every other conversation was about how she was ready to die, ready to see her husband, my grandfather, again. We would watch ghost shows together and daydream about contacting the dead. She told me that when she died, she would come back and send me signs. The time came, and she got her wish. She died that fall. I was devastated. I desperately searched for the signs that she had promised. But I got nothing. I was so lost and hurt. I didn't know what to do. I'd lie in bed at night and talk into the darkness of my room. I would obsess over the paranormal. I even downloaded Ouija boards on my phone. I would do EVP sessions. Still, I got nothing. I resigned myself to the thought that there was no life after death. God was a lie. There was no point to it all. It took years to heal. Who knows? Maybe I am still damaged. I only started noticing strange things 2 years after she died. I moved away to a different state. I needed a change. The new place was not isolated or old. It had only had 3 previous tenants. All alive and well. I checked. It started with odd feelings. Like someone was there. Voices down the hall in my kids' room. A water bottle was actually thrown across the dining room. I came up with logical reasons for it all. The walls were thin, the bottle could have been sitting on something unbalanced. Until one night when I was sitting on the couch. It was late. Everyone was asleep. I felt like someone was staring at me, glaring even. Like they were standing in the hallway, ready to run at me. There was a cold in the air that sank into my chest. I was absolutely terrified. I did not understand why. It lasted for what seemed like hours but was only actually a few minutes. I went straight to bed. A few weeks later we moved to an apartment in a different city. It was from the 80s and not very well kept up. The owner lost it in a card game, we were told by the other tenants. So when I heard odd noises, I thought nothing of it. I would feel like someone walked into a room, only to look up and see no one. I sat on the couch in the living room and saw the recliner just start moving. No one even close to it. No pets to brush up next to it. There would be small pops and cracks like someone dropping something metal. I would never go to investigate. It was like it wanted to be known. The more I ignored it, the worse it got. In the middle of watching a movie, I felt the couch sink ever so slightly. Then a tingly cold feeling slowly moved over my hand and up my arm. On everything I own, it felt like a hand brushing up my arm. It felt lonely. I had a strange feeling, like it was just a person longing for human interaction. I told it out loud. I know you are here. As long as you leave my kids alone, I am okay with you being here. Something in me told me that it understood. I cannot explain how or why, I just felt it in my heart. The activity had almost completely stopped after that. It was months until I actually saw it. I was alone in the house. I was lying on the couch looking at my phone. All of a sudden I felt it was there. I looked up and to the left and saw a white, shadowy figure in the shape of a person. It walked from my left to the right in an odd way. Like it was taking large steps. I jumped up and ran out of the apartment. Before you start to think about it being just my eyes staring at my phone, the shape was not rectangular like my phone. It was higher up than I was holding my phone. It was human-shaped. It took hours and a lot of cigarettes to work up the courage to go back inside. I closed the door behind me and spoke to it again. You have to leave me now. You are not welcome here anymore. I do not want you here. I was so scared I just wanted it to leave. Whoever and whatever it was. I didn't care anymore. It made my anxiety so much worse. It seemed to work. A year later we moved again. This apartment was warm and homey. I felt good there. It had the aura of a welcoming home. It was a year before I felt anything. But God help me, it did. It happened again. Again, it started with strange feelings. Like someone was there, staring at me. Drawers opened by themselves. Cold spots in odd places. My dog would bark at random places in the apartment. It was only once, but she even growled and barked. She is an English bulldog and very sweet and quiet, like her breed usually is. It was the first and only time she growled. I feel like either I am being followed by the same spirit or I am attracting them somehow. I have theorized maybe my constant videos and movies and TV shows about ghosts and demons may have opened the communications. Maybe I have invited them. It is scary and exciting at the same time. I want to know more but am afraid of the consequences. Can anyone provide insight? Maybe tell me what I did to start all this? Before I begin, I want to emphasize that everything in this story is true. I wish it wasn't real. I wish I was making it up. By the end, you will also find yourself wishing it was all just a fantastical story. But it isn't. So sit down and buckle up because the scariest thing about this story is that it is 100% true. I tell everything exactly as I remember it, without exaggeration. Now that the experience is finally over, I feel I can at last tell my entire story. I am not entirely human, and as such I am very sensitive to the spiritual realms. I always felt that I was something else because I never really fit in anywhere, able to see and sense things other people couldn't see or didn't believe were real. I later found out that I was a being known as a demon, which will become important later on. Either way, I could see and interact with numerous spirits, including a mysterious large gray cat spirit who showed up from time to time. The cat will become important later on in this story. Let's start with some background information. Misfortune has plagued me for as long as I can remember. I was born to a teenage mother who never wanted me but was guilted into keeping me by her family and her religion. She married my father but later betrayed and divorced him. She hated him and felt I was the mistake that ruined her life. As a result, she hurt me throughout most of my younger life. Much of the story regarding my childhood is horrifying in its own right, even without the paranormal aspect. I was subjected to terrible hurt, both mental and physical. It all ties in with the main narrative and is only one part of the misfortune that filled my life and everyone connected to me until recently. Happiness was an elusive thing, dangled in front of me and taken away every time I felt like it might have been in reach. Many times throughout my life, I thought I was cursed. But every time I tried to clear the curse, I never could. It would always come back. It would often return with a vengeance. Churches and pastors attempted to diagnose the situation as possession, and on several occasions, they tried to cast out demons, but none of their efforts were successful. When that approach failed, I consulted numerous psychics, but they were unable to provide any answers. Nothing they suggested worked, and while they would often say there was nothing there, I would see nervousness and fear in their eyes. Nobody could stop the curse, and most people believed I was just overreacting to normal stuff that happens to everyone. I even started to believe that for a time, even if a part of me somehow always knew otherwise. No normal person went through everything that I did. With all of this said, I will now dive into the actual story. The earliest incident I can remember was severe night terrors that happened when I was a child. It happened almost every night. I never slept well and was always exhausted. When I was around 8 years old, my nightmares became much worse. Shadowy things would approach me, creeping closer and closer. Moving like predatory beasts on the prowl. These were not your usual shadow people. They were vaguely humanoid, but more like they were trying to mimic a humanoid form and failing miserably. They always looked wrong and unnatural, like vaguely human-shaped eldritch horrors that could never just be imagined up in the mind of an innocent child. Twisted, long-limbed things surrounded by tendrils of blackness with wide mouths and burning pits for eyes. I'd often wake up bruised and shaking, crying, and unable to figure out what was going on. The most eventful night was when one of the things, more distinct and horrifying than the rest, lunged at me. Its long, sickle-like claw fingers were reaching right for my chest. Everything was vibrating around me, my head was filled with a sickening, heavy thrumming that was felt more than heard. I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't move. Just when I thought it was surely over and that I was going to die, a horrendous caterwauling feline scream filled the air around me as the mysterious gray cat spirit I had been seeing launched herself into the thing with her teeth bared and her claws out. The sound she uttered was like nothing I had ever heard or have ever heard since. I have heard cats fighting, but that could never compare to the shrieks coming from the gray spirit. I will tell you now, this gray cat was never really a real cat. I knew nobody else could see her, and I always felt comfortable around her despite her massive size and odd looks. She was kind to me. She came and went as she pleased, and when she appeared, the bad dreams would go away for a brief time. She gave me hope and respite. She always appeared around the size of a cheetah but with the face of a domestic cat with a wide nose and rather angular features. Her eyes were golden yellow with slit pupils and glowed in the darkness. She was long and lean, with one tattered up ear and the area around her right eye scarred up as well. She always had this mysterious, ancient, and powerful air, like the stray cat in a neighborhood that nobody could claim as their own. She was stormy gray in color with lighter underparts and subtle tabby markings around her shoulders, forehead, tail, and hindquarters. Her flesh was a dull pinkish color, and she had elongated canine teeth, almost like small sabers. Her most distinctive feature was her tail. It split halfway down, becoming two tails that moved independently of each other. The name that has always stuck in my mind when I saw her was Graymalkin. As Graymalkin attacked, the thing hovering over me let out a shriek of its own and fought back. Graymalkin continued to shriek and caterwaul in a stunning display of the vocal ranges of a cat, and all I could see was a blur of evil thing and gray cat fighting, splatters of black fluid flying everywhere, and a bit of her blood as well. Eventually, everything went quiet, and the thing faded away and vanished. I was still completely unable to move until I felt the cool touch of a damp nose against my forehead and the rumbling purr of a very large feline. I felt my breath return. I immediately began to sob uncontrollably. Graymalkin licked the tears away and continued to purr until I calmed down, then stayed beside me throughout the night, stretched around me with her head resting gently on my chest. She left around the sun's first light, though my forehead tingled throughout the day where she had touched me. That night, I discovered I could control my dreams. When the thing returned, I forced myself to move and became something bigger and scarier and scared it away. Graymalkin showed up in my dreams many times after that. The night terrors stopped. Graymalkin had given me a gift, the ability to control my dreams, and I could finally sleep in peace. It was a small comfort in light of everything else, because around the time I was 9 to 10, my mother remarried, got pregnant, and had a miscarriage. It changed her, and I saw her start to slowly go mad. She pulled me out of public school and decided to homeschool me. When she gave birth to my oldest little brother when I was 11, it went from bad to worse. She favored him, and everything he did was blamed on me. He was her miracle child and could do no wrong. I was the miserable mistake that ruined her life. I was hurt black and blue daily for different reasons each time. Even forced to sleep on the floor with no blankets or pillows. Or, even, outside with the dogs once or twice. Forced to sit for hours in an agonizing position called the thinking position for reasons only she understood. It was always my fault, always something I did wrong, always came back to the fact that I was the mistake that ruined her life and that her life would be perfect if I were gone. I was never allowed to go out, had no friends, and had no social interaction. Made to eat nothing but peanut butter sandwiches with no jelly for months at a time. I still can't smell peanut butter without nearly throwing up. When I was sent to spend time with my stepdad's mother, I was afraid to come back home and kept claiming that there were demons waiting for me, but only because that was the only thing I could think of at the time. I didn't know what it was, but I knew something, or some things, was watching me sleep. Every time I became attached to a toy or item, my mother felt that it was taking the place of God in my life, and she'd take it away. Everything I loved was taken away, and I became complacent and just sort of let it happen. There was nothing I could do about it, and I was slowly being broken into thinking I really was the problem. Even then, a part of me always remained strong. Some spark deep within that kept me from giving up. But that only angered my spiritual stalker even more. Anytime I found some light, or hope, it was ripped away from me. I could always see that eldritch horror on the side of my vision, off whooshing sounds and tendrils of darkness reaching from underneath anything dark to grab me, and sense the heaviness nearby. I could faintly hear its deathly cackling sometimes, like the grating of an unnatural, guttural voice gargling salt and gravel. If I attempted to concentrate on it, it remained subtly invisible. It only became clear if I wasn't paying attention to it. I often heard voices speaking in similar tones and figures looming over me as I tried to drift off to sleep each night. Unsurprisingly, my sleep remained terrible. Even with my ability to control my dreams, I couldn't control the thing that appeared in them. It wasn't part of the dream, it was something else entirely. I knew that much. I could do things in my dreams to protect myself, but it was touch and go, which meant my sleep was not very restful. I needed to remain vigilant at all times. When I saw Graymalkin, I had more strength, and the thing would back off for a time, but she wasn't constantly there. She never directly did anything for me aside from when she stopped the thing from ripping out my heart or whatever it wanted to do, and I believe she was trying to give me the strength or keep me on my toes whenever I started to grow weak. When my mother had a second child, when I was around 13 or so, it got worse and worse until I completely lost my room and was sleeping on the living room floor for months or even years without a blanket or pillow. I lost track eventually. She believed that my rebellion would not end, leading her to take more drastic measures. I was sent to a camp to be brainwashed at 15 years old. That really is the only way to describe it. I won't even begin to get into what they did to me in an effort to force me to follow religion, but it was stuff that I am fairly sure is illegal, and I am not at all sure how they got away with it, and I am amazed that I did not take my life during that time. Any time I considered it, Graymalkin would show up, and I would feel just enough of a flicker of hope to keep going. All the while, this eldritch horror thing continued to follow me. It continued to mock me, day in and day out, stalking around my awful, miserable little cot at night, which was only minimally better than sleeping on the floor. At least I had a pillow and a thin blanket. I felt it stalking behind me whenever we went outside, causing the others at the Reformation camp to think I was possessed. They tried to do exorcisms on me, which never worked. Nothing rid me of the thing, of the curse. They forced me to pray in an awkward and subservient position for several hours a day several times a day, but whenever I did, all I felt was an intense, pressing evil. Like clawed fingers digging into my temples. As the horrible feeling grew more intense, I felt as if I lost control of my body, the thrumming and vibrating and lack of movement from my dream. That terrible looming figure laughed wickedly in my mind as alien words rolled off my tongue. It left me quivering and shaking, and while the others rejoiced that I had made some sort of spiritual breakthrough, all I wanted to do was cry. They thought I was speaking in tongues, but I tasted blood and burning, as if the words were never meant to be spoken by a human's tongue. I was shaking and crying while they celebrated my spiritual breakthrough and speaking in tongues. They mistook it for joy. When I looked up, all I saw were those eldritch horrors standing all around me with their gaping mouths and burning eyes, sickle-clawed fingers reaching for me. I passed out. After that experience, I never truly prayed again and instead pretended to do so from then on. Eventually, I think they caught on that something was off, and they kicked me out of the program, feeling that I was unredeemable. They sent me back to my mother. I was both horrified. They had me brainwashed into firmly believing that I would go to hell unless I completed their program, and relieved, because I absolutely hated their program that stole my freedom and made me feel like less than a person. When I returned home, I was blamed for everything all over again. The abuse continued until my stepfather had me sent away to my grandmother soon after I turned 16. He had no idea how awful it was but knew I was miserable there. I also think he wanted to focus on his children rather than his wife's previous mistakes, even though he claimed that he didn't think differently of me. Either way, he was not aware of the full scale of abuse, and sending me away may have very well saved my life because I was just so close to ending it all once again. I was so broken and miserable. I saw Graymalkin again, and I was happy because it meant that I would have some respite. When she showed up, things were less dismal for a time, after all. I believed that my life would finally get better. Once I arrived at my grandparents', the curse vanished. They allowed me to draw. I was allowed to be creative. My true self wasn't being crushed and stifled, and I felt like I could actually breathe fresh air for once in my long, dismal existence. I started to open up and learn. I met new friends and had new experiences. I learned to think for myself and gained strength as a person. I met a friend who was like a sister to me. I also realized that religion wasn't right for me and followed my own path as a spiritual atheist. Life was wonderful. I was discovering myself. I was embracing my true self. However, fate had other plans, and the temporary relief was fleeting. Now was no exception. The next major night terror happened soon after I decided to follow my path. It was far, far worse than my first night terror. I remember the dream in intense detail, and I couldn't control it, which scared me even more. It started off mundane enough. I was at my grandparents' house, but in the dream, I was at a friend's. I remember hearing her speaking in hushed tones to her mother, who was speaking loudly. She was telling her mother to keep the noise down so that I could sleep. I opened my eyes to see the back of a filing cabinet, nicked up with half-peeled stickers on it. It was tan. Annoyed at her mother's loud speaking, I tried to move and shift to emphasize the fact that she was waking me up. That was when it turned bad. The bed shook violently, and the world collapsed around me, engulfing me in pure blackness. Whispers, icy cold and intensely burning hot at the same time, claws and rattling chains, and cackling and gargling whispers of those things surrounding me. A threatening feeling overtook me. A voice. You will never get away. The voice whispered in my ear, you will see what happens when you try. The worst of it was the pure, blind terror, like I had never felt in my life. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and could hardly even think. I managed to break out of the dream, but I couldn't open my eyes or move, and when they finally opened a slit, the thing lunged towards my face, then vanished. As soon as I could move, I screamed. I screamed until I swear my throat bled and couldn't sleep for weeks after that, sitting upright in bed in a quivering mess. I couldn't turn off any lights and barely ate. I knew it was more than a dream. I didn't tell anybody about it, feeling they'd think I was crazy, but I was truly and horribly shaken. Eventually, I calmed down. However, I continued to sleep with the light on for months. I slowly returned to normal, spending time with my friends, one of whom was like a sister to me. We hung out all the time, talked every day, and I even went to her house several times. All good things come to an end for me, however, and one day, out of nowhere, my friend just snapped. There was no reason, no lead up. Suddenly, we transitioned from being close friends to a deep-seated hatred. She betrayed me, turned my other friends against me, and left me feeling alone and miserable. I sank into another deep depression and refused to eat until I was thin and weak. The friend she turned against me realized what happened and came to apologize. She got worried that I had stopped contacting anybody and even refused to come to school. She visited me, insisted that I eat, and assisted me in my slow recovery. The other friend's insanity was sudden. Around this time, I started to notice a pattern. 333 would show up. It was a curiosity at first, but that soon turned to dread when I realized that number always showed up before things went bad. Soon after that, I turned 18. My grandma never treated me well because I think she believed my mother that I was rebellious or something, which was odd because I was always a quiet and well-behaved person, even as a teenager. I never went out and did anything stupid, never touched a drug or alcohol, and never went to stupid places where I could get hurt. I was quiet and respectful. But her views on me changed the instant she realized I wasn't Christian. She threw me out on the streets. A friend took me in so I wouldn't die on the streets. All seemed well for a time, but as was usual for me, it didn't last. Her uncle threw me out after his deranged girlfriend tried to attack me with a knife, and I broke her wrist defending myself. I had to panhandle enough money to take a train to another state so I wouldn't be on the streets again. Throughout this time, the heavy feeling never left me. I started seeing psychics, but none of them could figure out what was wrong. Instead, they appeared confused and frightened, ultimately ushering me out of the room dismissively. I never got any answers. Only the fake ones said good things. The real ones looked haunted and pale. I managed to get enough money to buy a train ticket and make my way to Wisconsin, where another online friend took me in. Once again, I was sure things would finally start looking up for me. I met someone who seemed nice and got a steady job. But, as was a trend with me, the niceness didn't last. He turned out to be a manipulative, emotionally abusive jerk. It went from bad to worse when I lost my job. A close friend of mine started to go crazy. She began to perceive the same visions that I was experiencing. She started to talk strangely. The things she said were just not her. It got worse and worse no matter how much I tried to save her. I tried to give her strength, I tried to talk her through it, but she went from being elated about a shining being she called a sun god to being horrified and sobbing and shaking in voice chat that something was watching her. Nothing I did helped. She committed suicide, and I knew that thing had done it. The thing stalking me drove her insane, ultimately leading her to commit. I was devastated. She was like a sister to me. I loved her dearly. I was also terrified. A series of unfortunate events occurred, which left me exhausted, weak, and struggling to stay off the streets. I couldn't keep a job no matter how hard I tried, and my ex got worse and worse as time passed. He would eat everything that was in reach, leaving me to have to hide and eat cold chili out of a can and drink warm soda. For 5 years, I lived in that hell. I was giving up, fast. 5 times I nearly attempted, but my cat stopped me, cuddling closer to me and giving me something to live for. Even still, I was breaking. Grey Malkin showed up again. She offered me a glimmer of hope. But by then, I was so broken, It was only a thin ray in the complete darkness that had overtaken me. Soon after, I received assistance in escaping my ex. My online friend and his brother came down and picked me up, keeping my ex from trying anything as I moved my belongings into a pod, and I was driven from Wisconsin to Kentucky. I was safe. I thought it was over, but I am sure all of you know exactly what happened next. Misfortune soon followed. It struck my now husband, my friend's brother. The closer I got to him, the more he was suffering from my ill luck, but I didn't want to be alone. I knew whatever it was affecting him, but I didn't want to leave him for my own selfish reasons. We had found a kindred spirit, and he helped me discover that I was a demon soul. As was he. We were meant for each other, and we got closer and closer as time passed. I often confided in him about the curse, but he didn't believe I was cursed, and like everybody else, he just thought I was overreacting to little things. Once again, I became complacent and wondered if perhaps I was overreacting. Maybe it was all just a coincidence. We eventually married. And had a child. We were happy, and something lured us to move to Florida, though we didn't know at the time that it was a trap. Once there, our misfortune got exponentially worse. There were frequent spiritual attacks, and nothing ever seemed to go right. He was sick constantly, his panic attacks were getting worse. Our young son was taken away on a false call to CPS by somebody we tried to help but later betrayed us despite ample proof that he wasn't neglected. We endeavored to locate a suitable adoptive home, aware that they would never return him to us based on the falsehoods they were propagating. His foster mother beat him to death. He would have been in his new home within a week or two. The thing came in closer and closer. I felt it. My husband felt it. I was too broken to care after my 17-month-old died. Somehow, I prevailed. After surviving, my husband and I began to heal, only to face false arrests, injuries, and treatment that dehumanized us. The brutal treatment and fear we experienced, combined with our fresh wounds that were still not healed, nearly broke us. We spent agonizing months in Florida, or hell, as I was calling it, fighting for our very freedom against false charges as our names were slandered to the point where we couldn't go out in public without feeling uncomfortable. We finally got some hope. We got a lead and decided to move out of Florida. But the closer we got to moving, the more everything was trying to stop us. It got dragged out for months. I was about to just give up as things were getting so tantalizingly close and then blowing up in our faces time and time again. A very close online friend finally revealed the identity of the thing that had plagued me all my life. She helped me find its name. Raghedera. The ruin. The madness. The desolate one. The hunter. Raghedera is a very malignant cosmic entity who drives anyone who witnesses it completely insane. Anyone it targets, it will stalk for their entire life. It will drive their friends and family away or end them one by one, isolating and breaking its prey down until nothing but a husk remains. It then goes in for the kill, devouring their tortured soul to turn them into one of its many spawn. It is ineffective against even ancient sigils like the Elder Sign, but its strong dislike for anything pine-related makes pine incense or pine trees a powerful deterrent against it and its spawn. This was true, at least temporarily. It plagued the life of Lovecraft himself, filling his sleep with nightmares and horrible dreams and glimpses of a reality beyond human understanding that he wrote into his books until he succumbed to its wiles. It appeared vaguely humanoid from the waist up, with 3 huge shadowy tentacles sprouting from its back and shoulders and a mess of smaller ones all around. My friend and I employed the help of a few friends with spiritual helpers, and we thought it was defeated, but it was a wily, clever thing and just kept coming back. Each time it came back, more misfortune struck my husband and me. Things would seem to get better, only to blow up again. Constant ups and downs were causing us to feel sick, weak, and intensely stressed out. My husband started having the same horrible dreams as my friend who had ended herself. It was trying to end him, and I utterly snapped. It had taken several friends from me, turned my family against me, taken my son from me, and was now trying to take my husband away from me. It was the sole remaining entity in my possession. I was trying to strangle my connection to the tree of life. My demon side awakened in an explosion of white fire. I tore and burned away the tendrils that were choking off my branch of the tree of life, shattered the source, and attacked the thing with all I was until it was consumed. Flickers of spiritual flame could be sensed all the way to the highway near the apartment complex. I thought it was over, but it was only one fragment of the thing. It was merely weakened. Raghedera went from having 3 large tentacles to 2. Immediately thereafter, things looked up. Our brother was able to help us move out of Florida to a lovely house in Colorado, somewhere far better. Raghedera continued to send its spawn after us, but my white fire consumed them instantly. It tried to attack our plane as it took off. It followed us to our new home in Colorado. All of its efforts were in vain. As we settled in, Triple threes started to show up again, but I had stopped being afraid. I had heard it once. I refused to let Rag Heatera ruin my husband's and my fresh start in our new home. I had entirely enough of Rag Heatera's crap. I used my lucid dreaming ability to enter the astral plane and defeat it once and for all. It took several nights. I had to rip off its remaining 2 tentacles and tear through its layers of protection to reach its core. The hunter became the hunted, and it knew it. Every night that I slept, I slipped into the astral plane. I hunted it down, and I attacked. Every time it fled, I tracked it down all over again. Finally, I achieved my goal. I reached its core. I destroyed the darkness, the evil that had plagued me my entire life. After a long, horrifying ordeal that lasted my entire life, from birth to my 28th year, it is finally over. I can finally rest. Rag Heatera is no more and will never hurt anyone ever again. My husband and I can finally have peace. The air feels lighter and better. My husband has an amazing job prospect that will have us doing really well. I feel alive again. Things have stopped going wrong aside from the normal inconvenience that every person experiences. The numbers have stopped showing up. I want to emphasize that spirits and entities are indeed very real. There are entities that exist beyond your imagination. Some entities are so strange and hostile that just one look at them can shatter your very mind. Not everyone has the soul of a demon or the aid of spiritual friends or other beings like Greymalkin. Let's just hope that one of these entities doesn't try to target you next.